Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances.
Jai. Good to see you. Okay, we'll start with Mangala Charanam. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militanyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Siti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Nashta Praeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Jai. So, welcome everyone to this morning's class. Someone had their hand up there? Looks like they put it down. Okay, so, Ras Raman Krishna Prabhu, would you like to
sorry,
say?
Mataji, by mistake. Hare Krishna.
Okay. All right, so today is going to be our final session together, and we're going to finish chapter 5, Krishna willing. Very nice chapter where we come to the conclusions of Narada's instructions to Vyasadeva in regard to cause of his despondency and what he needs to do to become satisfied and fulfill his mission to satisfy everyone by giving them the most exalted transcendental knowledge. So let's start. We left off on text 20. Or should we do a quick review of what we did yesterday? Because we kind of stopped mid-flow there. Who remembers something from yesterday's class? It wasn't too long ago, so hopefully you remember something. Someone, anyone?
Yesterday, Mataji, it started with the Vyasadeva feeling despondent, as you were mentioning, after having compiled all the Puranas and Vedas. And then he gets to, then Narad Muni comes and explains to him the reason why he is feeling despondent. And in fact, he glorifies him for having written those transcendental literatures. And but he says that your cause of despondency is because of not being able to describe the transcendental qualities of the Lord. So that is what he says that you must now focus on and exclusively devote on writing about the transcendental nature of the Lord, his form and his form, pastimes, and qualities. So that is what will make you get over this despondent condition.
Okay, good. Good overview. Anything else?
That is basically mood and mission of Srila Prabhupada.
Okay, yeah, we had a nice discussion where you all brought in points of Srila Prabhupada's mood and mission in regard to transcendental literatures and how they can bring about a revolution in human society. Good. And what else did we talk about?
I think Mataji also talk about, I remember the word Jugupsitam, where Narad Muni was kind of heavily criticizing and coming down upon Vyasadeva, where he's saying that the people have general tendency to enjoy in any case. And when you have written such, language, then they will naturally incline to enjoy, and they will take your name that, since you have written, so hence we are going to enjoy. So, and they will not care for prohibitions. So he was chastising.
Yeah, good. And then he was saying that because you said it, then they're all going to follow it because you're an authoritative person. And in this way, they're all going to be cheated out of the actual goal of life. So you need to make the real goal very clear.
And in the beginning, Naraji, Vyasadeva was sad, but Naraji was smiling because Naraji is a Shakti-Avek. He knows that about future, present, and past, and he knows that now the time has come. The Supreme Personality of Godhead will be glorified, and no other religion will be there. So, so this is the actual festival for the devotee.
Yeah, good. Very nice.
Hare Krishna Mataji, and we discuss, by trying to be happy, we ends up generally miserable. So we don't try to be happy. Just by chanting, by serving Krishna, we can be happy.
Right. So if we just try to make Krishna happy, we'll be happy. If we try to make ourselves happy separately from Krishna's happiness, we're just going to end up being more miserable and wasting our time and energy and money and everything else. Okay? Good.
Yes,
That's
Mataji.
life strategy.
One more thing, that goal of our life is to attach with Krishna and serve Krishna. This is the main purpose of our life. And any literature which does not describe Krishna is useless. And our main service or main thing is always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna, which you describe as Manmana Bhav Mad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. Krishna said in Bhagavad Gita also.
Okay, good. Yeah. Nice. We're getting the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness here in a nutshell in 5 minutes with all of your reflections.
And one more point in adding to this, that if we go for Karm Kand and all this stuff which has been written by Naraji in Vedas, so this is like putting any soul in 84 lakh species. So this is in the cycle of birth and death. So the human form is very rare, and if the soul has got a human form, in this human form only, they can achieve the they can go back. This is a chance, golden chance, that they can revive their consciousness of Krishna consciousness, and they can go back home, back to Godhead. So instead of putting them into 84 lakh species, we should give them something like, which is there is a pure science of Krishna consciousness.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, we
Another
quoted the
point,
verse
Mataji.
from Lord Rishabhadev, right? That human beings are meant for a higher happiness. They're meant because we're spirit, we're aham brahmasmi, then we're meant for Brahma Sokyam, not this so-called pleasure of the senses, which is meant for, which even the hogs and dogs that eat stool get that low-level pleasure. Yes, somebody was speaking?
Yeah, another point, I mean, a devotee who falls down temporarily, there is not a big loss for him. First, he still, I mean, the bhakti, whatever he has done, that is permanent. It is not lost. And then we understood two examples of Maharaj and Chitraketu, and also Ajamil. How when, since, I mean, they had done bhakti and then, they had fallen because of one reason or the other. But then they did not forget the Lord's name, and they could revive their connection with the Lord and continue doing the bhakti, I mean, again in their next birth. So,
Very good. Yeah, so a devotee, I mean, a non-devotee, even if they're very successful materially, there's no benefit.
oh, yeah. That
But
is,
as a devotee, even if they fail, there's no loss. It's all benefit. And even in their fallen state, after starting the Krishna consciousness, if they fall, even in the fallen state after starting, they're always protected by Krishna, and they're always guided towards gradual progress. And they will come back, because having once tasted the nectar of Krishna's lotus feet, you can't give it up. Nothing else compares to it. You'll have to come back to that. And the devotee is, remember we talked about how the devotee is embraced by Krishna's lotus feet.
that was very sweet.
Okay, great. Very ecstatic reflection. So let's go ahead. Yeah, that's what we left off on, is that even while a devotee is in that fallen condition, their suffering is not due to karma, and they're going to come back. So text 20. Someone please read.
Excuse me, Mataji.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to stop you in the middle, but I have a question regarding this statement.
Oh, sure.
So I heard a class yesterday, Mataji, by His Grace Mukund Dutt Prabhu, who's a proper disciple. He was giving a class in Vrindavan, Bhagavatam class. So he said, we are saying that devotees are not affected by karma. They are always under the shelter of Krishna. But that class, Prabhuji said, I heard it yesterday only. So I was massively confused by evening. He was saying that, devotees do get affected by prarabdha karma. I mean, could be to a higher extent or could be to a lower extent. It depends. But in the evening class, we heard the devotees are not affected. Could you just, just elaborate a little bit and clarify what exactly, is happening here?
Yeah. So prarabdha karma means the karma that's already manifested, right? So like the body that we have at the present time, that's our prarabdha karma. So that's not going to change, right? Like the family that you were born in, the body that you, the gender, the race, how tall you are, what color hair you have, whatever, that's not going to change by bhakti. But the thing is that bhakti will, in one sense, eliminate even that, because it will eliminate our identification with that. So that prarabdha karma, externally, it will still be there, and to some extent, it will be, a part of our life, our experience of the world. But as we become more advanced in devotional service, even that will fall away. you know, like Prahlad Maharaj, when we hear descriptions of Prahlad Maharaj, it says that he wasn't even conscious of his body. He wasn't even aware of how his body was working. So, like that. And then all the other karma is gone. All the stages, aprarabdha, phalam, what is it? Aprarabdha, phalam papam, bijam, kutam bijam, phalam mukam. They're all gone step by progressive practice of bhakti. Is that clear? Is that satisfying, or are you still confused?
No, yes, Mataji. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So then someone please recite text 20.
Idam hi vishwam bhagwan ivetaro yato jagasthana nirodha sambhava tadhi swayam veda bhavam stathapite pradesha matram bhavata pradarshitam. The Supreme Lord Personality of Godhead is himself, this cosmos, and still he is aloof from it. From him only this cosmic manifestation emanated. In him it rests, and unto him it enters after annihilation. Your good self knows all about this. I have given only a synopsis.
Right, thank you. Yeah, so the point here is that Krishna is everything. Everything, because everything is his energy. And yeah, so because this cosmos is also Krishna's energy, you could say that it's him. But of course, we know that it's Achintya Bheda Abheda Tattva, because the energies of Krishna are Krishna. They're nothing but Krishna, but at the same time, Krishna, Bhagavan, is aloof from his energies. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada gives the analogy of the tree. It says in the same way that the leaves and branches are also the tree, but the tree itself is not just the leaves or branches. So, yeah, in the same way, nothing is separate from Krishna, because like Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo, mata sarvam pravartate, that I am the source of everything emanates from me. All the spiritual and material worlds, everything comes from Krishna. So when we were looking at text 14 of the same chapter, it said that the view that having a view that something is separate from Krishna simply causes a disturbance. So this is a suggestion from Narada Muni that you simply need to describe the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because anyways, everything is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's nothing separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So don't waste your time talking about other things. Just describe Krishna. And if you need to mention any other thing, make sure that you mention it in connection with Krishna. So even in the Bhagavatam, we see there are some other subject matters. There's the structure of the universe, there's, the time scales, the manvantaras, and all these things. But they're all very clearly related to Krishna. All the presenters of the Bhagavatam are very careful to relate everything to Krishna, because this is the whole purpose of the Bhagavatam. And this is the instruction that, everything is comfort. If you're going to describe the creation, because the one we were talking about in the very first class that I gave is that the top 10 topics of the Bhagavatam, Sarga, Visargas, all those. So yeah, you're going to talk about the creation and the subcreation and the maintenance and the protection and the destruction of the universe, all these things. But it all has to be in relation to Ashraya, the summum bonum. And that's the point that Narada Muni is making here. And he says, you know all this, you already know this. I'm giving only a synopsis just to remind you that these are the things that need to be clarified. Okay, let's go to text 21. Someone please read.
Tvamatmatmanam aveha amoghadrik parasya pumsa paratmanah kalam ajam prajatam jagata shivayatan mahanubhava abhyudhaya adhiganyam tam. Your goodness has perfect vision. You yourself can know the super soul personality of Godhead because you are present as the plenary portion of the Lord. Although you are birthless, you have appeared on this earth for the well-being of all people. Please therefore describe the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, more vividly.
Thank you. And so here we have, for the third time, that Narada is saying that Vyasadeva is Amogha Drik, that his, Prabhupada translates it, perfect vision. So we were talking about how Amogha means that it's not fruitless, it's not futile, it's not useless. So in other words, you have a vision which is very useful for the world. You know, the vision that you have of reality is something that the world really needs to also see. You need to show them that vision. And he's also hinting at how, because he's already instructed Vyas to sit down and to meditate, to get into a trance, remember? Samadhi Anusmara, to get into this trance of remembering the Lord and the pastimes of the Lord. And so that he will have a vision of all of those things. And later in chapter 7, he's going to do that. He's going to sit down and he's going to see the Lord. And then he's going to see the Lord's relationship with the world, how people are in Maya, how to get out of Maya. And that vision, that drik, is going to be amogha, because it's going to be extremely useful for everyone, for all of us, that everyone will be able to achieve the goal of life as a result of Vyasadev's perfect vision. Okay, and so now here also he's urging Vyasadeva, please describe the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna more vividly. So we see in this chapter that he's repeatedly making this request. And in the next verse also, he talks more about what is real knowledge. So let's go to text 22.
Idam hi punsam tapasa shrutasya va swishtasya suktasya cha buddhi datayo avichyutor artha kavibhir nirupito yad uttama shloka gunanuvarnanam. Learned circles have positively concluded that the infallible purpose of the advancement of knowledge, namely austerities, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting of hymns and charity, culminates in the transcendental descriptions of the Lord, who is defined in choice poetry.
Thank you. Yeah, so in the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about all the different branches of knowledge: art, science, philosophy, physics, chemistry, psychology, economics, politics, etc. But the point is that all these branches of knowledge, and of course in the verse also we have, austerities, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting of hymns. These are all aspects of knowledge. But the point is that the culmination of all knowledge and all religious practices is Yad Uttama Shloka Gunanuvarnam, descriptions of the transcendental qualities of the Lord. So this is what all these things are meant for. So you could say that even non-devotees who are going to, university, there's so many universities all around the world, and they're studying, but the ultimate goal of their studies, even though they don't know this yet, is the descriptions of the transcendental qualities of the Lord. All knowledge is ultimately leading towards that. And if people just continue in their pursuit of knowledge, they're ultimately going to have to come to the Lord. And that's the whole process of Sankhya yoga, is that it starts with like an analytical study of the world, which is what scientists do, right? Through physics and chemistry, biology, all these things. But ultimately, especially if it's done, from a theistic point of view, then it's going to lead to understanding God, if one takes it to its logical conclusion. And in the purport here, Srila Prabhupada talks about the usefulness of knowledge when it's applied in Krishna's service. So let's see. Let's have someone read the second paragraph of the purport.
When advancement of knowledge is applied in the service of the Lord, the whole process becomes absolute. The personality of Godhead and his transcendental name, fame, glory, etc. are all non-different from him. Therefore, all the sages and devotees of the Lord have recommended that the subject matter of art, science, philosophy, physics, chemistry, psychology, and all other branches of knowledge should be wholly and solely applied in the service of the Lord. Art, literature, poetry, painting, etc. may be used in glorifying the Lord. The fiction writers, poets, and celebrated literatures are generally engaged in writing of sensuous subjects. But if they turn towards the service of the Lord, they can describe the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Valmiki was a great poet, and similarly Vyasadeva is a great writer, and both of them have absolutely engaged themselves in delineating the transcendental activities of the Lord, and by doing so have become immortal. Similarly, science and philosophy also should be applied in the service of the Lord. There is no use presenting dry speculative theories for sense gratification. Philosophy and science should be engaged to establish the glory of the Lord. Advanced people are eager to understand the absolute truth through the medium of science, and therefore a great scientist should endeavor to prove the existence of the Lord on a scientific basis. Similarly, philosophical speculations should be utilized to establish the supreme truth as sentient and all-powerful. Similarly, all other branches of knowledge should always be engaged in the service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita also, the same is affirmed. All knowledge not engaged in the service of the Lord is but nescience. Real utilization of advanced knowledge is to establish the glories of the Lord, and that is the real import. Scientific knowledge engaged in the service of the Lord and all similar activities are all factually Hari Kirtan or glorification of the Lord.
Jai, thank you. So this is a very strong statement here by Srila Prabhupada, that scientific knowledge engaged in the service of the Lord, or any knowledge or any activities engaged in the service of the Lord, are Hari Kirtan. They're also glorification of the Lord. And it's important to understand, because in the beginning days, in the early days of ISKCON, the devotees thought that academic education was Maya. And they were encouraging all the new devotees who were joining, if they were college students, to drop out of school, move into the ashram, and just, do full-time temple services or preaching, Harinam, like that. So, these devotees, of course, had good intentions. They wanted the best, and they thought that was the best. They thought that was what Prabhupada wanted. But they were a little naive and imbalanced. And also, in the early days, that most of those early devotees were coming from a hippie background. And so their motto was something like, tune in, switch off, and drop out, or something like that. But drop out was definitely the conclusion. They were just dropping out of school, dropping out of society. And so I think that somewhat influenced their style of application of Krishna consciousness. Encourage everybody just drop out and become a devotee. Tune in to this. So, but that's not what Prabhupada's saying. And if devotees had, read this purport, which was available because it was in the first canto, they would have understood things in a more balanced way, that all academic subjects can actually be used nicely in the service of the Lord. And as long as they are, then that is also Hari Kirtan. That's also a glorification of the Lord. So now we've understood that. Now, of course, ISKCON is over 50 years old. And so devotees have matured. And now we see that university education is a good thing, because the knowledge and the skills that are gained from education, even though that education may come from mundane sources, it's spiritualized when it's used in Krishna's service. And Srila Prabhupada was so happy when His Holiness Bhakti Swarup Damodar became a devotee, because he had a PhD in biochemistry, and Srila Prabhupada was just like, yes, this is what we need. We need devotees like you who can, within the field of science, can promote Krishna consciousness through science, and attract educated people, and change the way, because science was on a more of an atheistic trend, trying to promote evolution and alternatives to any kind of theistic philosophy, basically promoting atheism. So Srila Prabhupada said, if our scientists within, the academic fields can prove that through biochemistry, through actual science, that God exists or must exist, or there's the logical scientific conclusion that God must exist, then that will be such a great achievement. So he was happy, and he wanted that. And he started the BI, Bhaktivedanta Institute, for this purpose. And Srila Prabhupada was so proud of his devotee scientists. So all the subjects can be connected to Krishna, because we were just hearing Krishna is everything. There's nothing separate from Krishna. So we don't have to reject anything. And that's the whole, that's our philosophy of renunciation, that we don't actually give up anything. We don't reject anything. Rejecting things is just, that's falgu vairagya. It's false renunciation. But the real renunciation is yukta vairagya, is using everything in Krishna's service without being attached to it, with complete detachment. Anasaktasya vishaya yataham upayunjataha nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyam uchite. So, we shouldn't encourage anyone to drop out of school. We should encourage everyone to get their educations, and then just guide them in how to use their knowledge and skills in Krishna's service and spiritualize everything. So I think pretty much we've come to that. I know that there are some temples, like I heard that, I'm not sure if it's still that way, but I heard that Chaupati temple, they won't accept anyone into the brahmachari ashram unless they have at least a bachelor's degree. So it's funny. It's just funny that that's a requirement now, because before it was like, oh, you have a degree, that's a lot of maya. You really have to counteract all that and clear that out of your system, the slaughterhouse of the intelligence and all that. So slaughterhouse of the intelligence is, if people are just trained for sense gratification. But if the training is that, we're doing this for the service of Krishna, then anything can be accepted. We can accept absolutely anything in the service of Krishna. And it all becomes Hari Kirtan. All right, so let's go to text 23.
Hare Krishna. Aham purati tabhave bhavam mune dasyastu kasyaschana vedavadina nirupito balaka eva yoginam shushrushane pravrishiner vivekshatam. Translation. O Muni, in the last millennium I was born
as the son of a certain maidservant engaged in the service of Brahmanas who were following the principles of Vedanta. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, I was engaged in their personal service.
All right, so here, so far, Narada's been speaking to Vyasa about the importance of describing and hearing the topics of Krishna, his name, form, qualities, and pastimes. And now what he's doing is he's giving himself as an example of the power of Krishna Katha to transform the heart. And because we had that verse, Tadvag Visargo Janataga Viplavo, that when we hearing the topics of the Lord, it causes a revolution in the impious lives of the world's misdirected civilization. So Narada Muni is giving himself as an example of this revolution, that how hearing the Bhagavatam from pure devotees caused a revolution in his consciousness and in his life, because he was, born the son of a maidservant. We don't hear about his father. Apparently, father was unknown or not around. And so, it looks like it was not a high birth. He was kind of low born. He was just a little, Shudra boy, no education. And, but just by hearing, so it looked like his future wasn't very bright, right? You could say, from a mundane estimation. And his consciousness may not have been very exalted, especially since he was just so small. He was a young boy. But by hearing, it shows how even despite his material disqualifications, his life, his consciousness became perfect. He became a pure devotee in a very short time. So he's using this as an argument. See, Narada Muni is building up an argument to convince Vyasadeva, you have to write about the topics of the Lord. So so far he's been speaking philosophically, and now he's going to say, just look what it did to me, and just look at how it changed my life, these topics of the Lord, so quickly. It's so powerful. This is what people need. So, yeah. And he says, specifically, he also mentions the not only the power of hearing, but also the power of serving devotees. So it says here, Yoginam Shushushane. And that Shushushane reminded me of a verse that you already studied here from 1:2:16. Shushusho Shradadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevana. That he says, by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. So it may have been that when Narada, in his past life as a small boy, when he first started going to serve these Bhaktivedantas, because his mother was a maidservant, apparently, sounds like she was something like a cleaning maid in the ashram, like she was one of the caretakers of the Dharmshala or something, to clean the rooms and helping in the kitchen, that kind of thing. So looks like the boy, Narada in his past life, would accompany his mother, and so he would also help her. Whatever she was doing, he would just help. So by that service, then great service was done, because then he gained an attraction for hearing about Krishna. And so going there and helping with the services, and then he saw that, they're talking about Krishna. He had an attraction. I want to hear what they're saying. So then, when he wasn't needed by his mother, he would go and sit with those great souls. Prabhupada calls them the Bhaktivedantas. He would sit with the Bhaktivedantas and he would hear. He would hear about Bhakti Vedanta. He would hear that the conclusion of all the Vedas is Bhakti. And so, and he would hear about the pastimes and descriptions of qualities and names of Krishna. So, it says here in the last couple of sentences of the purport to 1:2:16, By serving the servants of the Lord, one gradually gets the quality of such servants, and thus one becomes qualified to hear the glories of the Lord. The eagerness to hear about God is the first qualification of a devotee eligible for entering the kingdom of God. So this is another thing that one gains by serving devotees is the qualities of the devotees. So we are hearing about how Narada, by his birth, this is also a good example of, the question was, what about prarabdha karma that Priya Satyabhama Mataji raised? By his prarabdha karma, he was totally disqualified, by his family, by his age, by his, Shudra background, whatever, that he was, he didn't have qualifications for hearing. But then by associating with those devotees, he got he gained the qualities of those devotees, and then those qualities became his qualification. So the prarabdha karma changed. He was, by his birth, he was unqualified, but by hearing, by association with, by bhakti, by service, he became qualified. So now he's a qualified person. His prarabdha karma changed. Now his whole trajectory in life is going to be different. You see, because the prarabdha karma changed. It's not going to happen the way it happened, the way things were ordained by his birth chart. So now, because he's eager to hear about God, then that's the first qualification. And by that, he's going to become eligible to enter the kingdom of God. And then we'll see that as the story unfolds about Narada Muni's life, or previous life. Okay, let's go on to text 24.
Te mai pita khil chapale rabhake dante dhrit kirnanne kanuvartini Chatru kripam yadyapi tulya darshana shushrushmane munyo labhashini. Translation: although they were impartial by nature, those followers of the Vedanta blessed me with their causeless mercy. As far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled and had no attachment for sports, even though I was a boy. In addition, I was not naughty and I didn't speak more than required.
Yeah, so this are some of the ways in which his qualities were becoming purified, because he's saying that the followers of the Vedanta blessed him, and well, whether he had these qualities already and that's why he became dear to the Bhakti Vedantas, or whether it was the blessings of the Bhakti Vedantas by which he developed these qualities, or a combination of the two. See, it says, okay, it says, even the most forgotten soul, by such endeavor, in other words, the endeavor to reestablish our lost relationship with Krishna, even the most forgotten soul is roused up to the sense of spiritual life, and thus being initiated by the Bhakti Vedantas, the people in general gradually progress on the path of transcendental realization. So the Vedanta Vadis initiated the boy even before he became self-controlled and was detached from sporting, etc. But before the initiation, the boy, became more and more advanced in discipline, which is very essential for one who wishes to make progress in the line. And then Prabhupada talks about how training, Gurukul training, is very important for young boys to so that they don't waste their lives in an irresponsible life of sense enjoyment. So yeah, it seems that before initiation, or before associating with him, he didn't have such pure qualities, but by associating with them, or they accepted him. In any case, they accepted him. And that's why he says causeless mercy, because he says, I wasn't qualified. But even so, even before I was self-controlled, even before I was detached from childish sporting, still they accepted me. So this is a quality of a devotee. You know that when and also for us, we should bear this in mind, that many people come to us curious about bhakti for whatever reasons that they might come to the temple, and they may not be very cultured. They may not have very good behavior. They may not be self-controlled. They may still be interested in so many, mundane activities, but still we need to accept them because they've come. And then by association, and have, confidence that by associating with devotees and by, hearing and serving, then they're going to gradually develop the good qualities. And the roughness around the edges that they came with will get smoothed over, and they'll become gentle and all that. And so in the beginning, like those of us who are serving in preaching centers, cultivating new devotees, we need to have a lot of tolerance, just be tolerant, and don't get on new people's cases very much about all the little things they're doing wrong and all of their, bad qualities that manifest from time to time, and just tolerate it and encourage them to engage more and more in the processes of bhakti, create good association for them, opportunities for good association, engage them nicely in services which they're interested in, and gradually their qualities will change. So that's what Narada Muni is saying that happened to him. And he's saying it was quite remarkable, like he's pointing this out. This is quite remarkable that even though I was a young boy, I lost my attachment for all kinds of childish play. I had no attachment for sports. I wasn't naughty, because usually young boys are very naughty. And I didn't even speak much. Usually like young children, they're always chattering away and driving their parents nuts with all their questions and commentaries. So he's like, I didn't speak more than required. Okay, so that attests to, this is personal testimony to the purifying process of bhakti, and especially the service of the devotees, which Krishna says is greater than his own personal service. And we can see here from the personal example of Narada Muni that service of the Lord begins with the service of the Lord's devotees. Because he didn't know anything about the Lord. We don't hear that he was born with any kind of he doesn't talk about, Krishna. Yeah, I was really interested in Krishna, and my mother taught me about God and I wanted to know more. That wasn't the case. He just had the good fortune of getting that association. So his service to the devotees is what brought him to God consciousness. Okay, text 25.
उच्छिष्टलेपान् अनिमोदितो द्विजः साकृत् समाभुञ्जे तत् अपास्त किल्बिषः एवं प्रविष्टस्य विशुद्धा चेतसस् तद्धर्म इवात्मरुचिः प्रजायते. Once only, by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by so doing, all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus, being engaged, I became purified in heart, and at that time, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me.
Thank you. Yeah, so here we see also the power of eating the remnants of pure devotees' prasadam. So some of the effects here that he mentions are apasta kilbisha, that all of his sins were eradicated. And also vishuddha cetasa, that his heart or his consciousness became vishuddha, became very pure. And then tat dharma evatma ruchi prajayate, that by taking the remnants of devotees prasadam, the maha prasadam, one becomes attracted to the dharma. It says tat dharma evatma ruchi. One gets a taste for that lifestyle, the devotee lifestyle, basically the lifestyle of a transcendentalist, of the dharma, the nature and activities of a transcendentalist. And so, he was free from his sinful reactions, his heart became purified, and he became attracted to being a devotee. He wanted to live that lifestyle that the transcendentalists were living, which is very different than the lifestyle of anyone else. We see that. So when people come to Krishna consciousness and they start practicing, doing services, associating with devotees, hearing from devotees, taking prasadam, then they become attracted to the lifestyle. They want to learn how to live the life of a transcendentalist, how to discipline themselves, to wake up early, to do the morning program, and just live a very clean and noble, godly life. Whereas before, if you walk up to some random person in the street and you're like, so how would you like to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and spend, spend 2 hours just chanting Hare Krishna and, Guru Puja and hearing from Shastra and doing service? They'll be like, no, I don't think so. I'll just stay with my family and my job and earn money and buy things that I like and eat what I like and do what I like. And they're not interested. But as soon as they engage in in a little service and prasadam and hearing, then all of a sudden they're very interested. They want to do that. They want to do nothing but that. And forget about everything else. They lose their interest for all the things that they previously used to like. So it's very powerful and very transformative. And this is the Viplava, the revolution that takes place through Bhakti. And so Narada Muni is making this point that you need to give them, this is what you need to give them. You need to give the Bhagavatam. This revolution can take place. Let's actually, this purport here is a little long, but it's very ecstatic. And it's nice how at the end of the purport, Prabhupada goes into the stages, the progressive stages of bhakti, from leading up to prema, anartha nivritti, and all the stages leading up to prema. And what prompts him is because the word is mentioned here in the last line, tat dharma evatma ruchi prajayate. So ruchi is one of the stages, and Narada Muni is talking about how in his previous life he came to the stage of ruchi just by taking the remnants of food stuff. So someone please read the purport.
Hare Krishna. Pure devotion is as much infectious in a good sense as infectious diseases. A pure devotee is cleared from all kinds of sins. The personality of Godhead is the purest entity, and unless one is equally pure from the infection of material qualities, one cannot become a pure devotee of the Lord. The Bhakti Vedantas, as above mentioned, were pure devotees, and the boy became infected with their qualities of purity by their association and by eating once the remnants of the food stuff taken by them. Such remnants may be taken even without permission of the pure devotees. There are sometimes pseudo-devotees, and one should be very much cautious about them. There are many things which hinder one from entering devotional service, but by the association of pure devotees, all these obstacles are removed. The neophyte devotee becomes practically enriched with the transcendental qualities of the pure devotee, which means attraction for the personality of Godhead's name, fame, quality, pastimes, etc. Infection of the qualities of the pure devotee means to imbibe the taste of pure devotion always in the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. This transcendental taste at once makes all material things distasteful. Therefore, a pure devotee is not at all attracted by material activities. After the elimination of all sins or obstacles on the path of devotional service, one can become attracted. One can have steadiness, one can have perfect taste, one can have transcendental emotions, and at last one can be situated on the plane of loving service of the Lord. All these stages develop by the association of pure devotees, and that is the purport of this stanza. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. This reminded me because Prabhupada said pure devotion is as much infectious in a good sense as infectious diseases. And also we're talking about taking the remnants of devotees' food. So it just reminded me that during COVID, everybody was worried about getting infected with the COVID virus. And so like here, we usually eat off metal plates. So for the whole time during COVID, we weren't using the metal plates. We were using paper plates because we thought, well, if somebody didn't wash their plate properly and they had COVID, some remnants, little, whatever might be left behind, and you might get infected with COVID by eating off that plate that wasn't properly cleaned. So in the same way, by eating the remnants of a person who has COVID, you can get COVID. By eating the remnants of food of a person who has bhakti, you can get bhakti. It's just as infectious as an infectious disease, and the way that it's transmitted is also quite similar. So it's just funny. So yeah, this is a very easy and a very pleasant way. It's like bhakti is so nice. Everything is just so easy. Everybody likes to eat. So you can just eat the remnants of food left by Krishna, eat the remnants of food of a devotee. Everybody likes to sing and dance and hear some stories. And, Krishna's pastimes are so dramatic and so interesting. It's just all the things that everybody likes to do anyway, sing, dance, eat, have friends, get together, talk about interesting things, hear stories, talk about them. It's what a good life. And then by this one comes to the highest stage. So Prabhupada's going through these stages that from having a little bit of faith and coming to the association of devotees and beginning to do some service, then the elimination of all sins or obstacles on the path, that's anartana vritti. One becomes attracted, and so that's like asakti, although it's not exactly in the order here. Steadiness, nishta, taste, ruchi. One can have transcendental emotions, bhava, and at last situate on the plane of loving service of the Lord, Krishna prema. So all this comes from just these very simple and very easy and enjoyable processes of bhakti. Okay, let's go to text 26.
Mataji, may I ask a question here?
Yes, please.
Is the mundane education really necessary to advance in the devotional service? Like previously you said in the previous verses, that mundane education is necessary and we never recommend anybody to drop out. And you also gave an example of some temple like ISKCON Chopati might be. They never prefer to take anyone to be less than a degree holder at least in the brahmachari ashram. So like in the case of Narad Muni itself, we can see Narad Muni was a low caste born and he was not highly educated. Similarly, in our material world, there are some people who are unfortunate and due to their circumstances or by their prarabdha, they are not able to get the higher education, or at least the basic education also they don't get. So is the devotional service really dependent on the mundane education?
Yeah, I didn't say that it was necessary, that mundane education was necessary to take to bhakti, because bhakti is available to anyone from whatever the background is. I was just making the point that it's not necessarily a problem, because it used to be seen as a problem, like like a disqualification, practically. So I'm not saying that it's a prerequisite, but I'm also saying that it's not necessarily a disqualification for bhakti. So one can be educated or not educated and still take the bhakti. A person who doesn't have education, they can do some services. And then, I don't know why Chopati Temple had that policy. I think because they had so many applicants, they had so many young men that were wanting to move into the ashram, and they had limited space. So they were thinking, the ones with the education, they're going to have a higher level of competency, perhaps. I'm not sure exactly what their rationale was behind that decision, but yeah, maybe they're thinking, let's have for our ashram devotees, let's have a very high quality of people who have gone through education or coming from good backgrounds, and then that will make Krishna consciousness more attractive for others to join.
Okay, thank you, Mataji.
Is that okay? All right. Okay, good. Text 26.
Tatranvaham Krishna Katha Pragatya Manu Grihena Shrinvam Manoharaha Tam Shraddhaya Menupadam Vishnavataha Priya Shravasyanga Mama Bhavadrochi. Translation: O Vyasadeva, in that association and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of the Lord Krishna, and thus listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of God had increased at every step.
Yeah, so Narada emphasizes here how he had heard the attractive activities of Krishna. And the effect was that his ruchi, his taste for those hearing those activities, increased at every step. Anupadam. It's like padam after padam, at every step after step, it increased. So by the combination of two things, so it was by the combination of these two things. So one was his eager and faithful hearing, like it says, Shrinavam, hearing, Shraddhaya, respectfully, faithfully, or Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that this word Shraddhaya indicates without attachment, or, indicating that he had actually come to the 10th stage in those stages, the stage of asakti. Vishwanath says 10th stage. I'm not sure how he's calculating 10th, but anyways, he says that this indicates that he had come to the stage of asakti. And so, yeah, Narada's saying that he progressed. He was progressing from ruchi. He was step by step progressing. And so Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that in this verse, he's saying that he had come to asakti. And that's indicated by the word Shraddhaya. And that happened as a result of hearing. And then the other thing that played into his advancement was anugrahena, or the causeless mercy of the pure devotees. So the two things are required. We need to make an effort to hear, and we also need to pray for the mercy of the devotees. Without the mercy of the devotees, the hearing doesn't have such an effect. It's kind of like it's like there's certain vitamins that you have to take. The vitamin, let's say if you have a deficiency in your body, so you need to get the right nutrition, and you can do that by taking some vitamin pills. Okay, so but there are some vitamins that the body can only assimilate if there's another in the presence of another nutrient. So you need to take that vitamin with another vitamin, and then it works. So in the same way, so they're both good for you, they're both required, but they need each other to work. So faithful hearing is food for the soul. It's vitamin, it's nutrition for the soul. But in order for it to be properly assimilated, in order for it to really go into the system and do what it has to do to improve our overall health, then the causeless mercy, the mercy of the pure devotees, needs to be there too. And that's why, somebody can come to a class and hear very nicely, but if they don't have good relationships with the devotees, then they're still not going to make so much spiritual advancement despite their regular hearing. Whereas if we go to class and hear every day, and we're also very respectful and humble, and we have a nice service attitude towards the devotees, always trying to help devotees out, and then we benefit so much. Then the hearing really just sinks in, it goes straight to the heart, and it enacts a change of heart. So those both those things are necessary, and Narada Muni is saying that in that association and by the mercy, then I could hear. So those two things, by the mercy, he was able to hear. So again, he's emphasizing the importance of hearing the activities of the Lord, the attractive activities of the Lord. And he's making this point that if those pure devotees, if those Bhakti Vedantas didn't know the pastimes of Krishna, then how could they speak them? And if they didn't speak the pastimes of Krishna, then how could I have heard them? And if I hadn't heard the pastimes of Krishna, then I wouldn't be here standing in front of you right now as your spiritual master. So, yeah, he's really emphasizing that the pastimes of Krishna need to be available. And we heard that this episode of his previous life that Narada Muni is narrating, that was a previous millennium, was a previous kalpa. So we heard that in every kalpa, someone comes and gives the Bhagavatam, just like, there's the Yuga Dharma, there's a Yuga avatar who comes at every millennium and teaches the process of religion for the age. So the Bhagavatam is also spoken again and again in every millennium. So in a previous millennium, the Bhagavatam was present, it was existing in society, and these Bhaktivedantas in that had heard the Bhagavatam and they were able to speak it. So he's saying now in the present millennium, these pastimes are unknown. They're largely unknown. They're not available. So I was lucky because in my past life, in previous kalpa, they were known. Somebody was kind enough to present the Bhagavatam and speak the Bhagavatam, and I heard the Bhagavatam. Now I'm Narada Muni. So, but that's missing now. That's a big deficiency. It's lacking in human society. So it's up to you to do this. Now you are the person who needs to present the pastimes of the Lord so that other people like me in my past life can hear it, and anybody from any situation, even without disqualification, even the son of a single mother, son of a maidservant, a poor little boy can become a great devotee by hearing. So this is what he's trying to impress upon Narada Muni. And yeah, another point is that the main reason that Krishna comes to this world is to attract the minds of the fallen souls to come back to Godhead by hearing his activities. So Krishna comes and he performs his activities, the same activities that he does in Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual world. He just comes and it's like a road show. He comes and he's showing, this is what I do in the spiritual world. Here are my friends, here are my family, here are my cows. This is what we do. We play, we have a great time. It's exciting, it's adventurous, it's so much fun. Come and join us. Come, don't stay here rotting away in your material life. Be attracted to all the things that I do and come back to me and let's do them together. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And the whole reason that you're suffering is because you're not doing those things. You're doing so many other stupid things that have nothing to do with you and who you are. It's just a illusion. This is the reality. This is your home. This is your identity. So just, wake up and come home. So yeah. And the process works because by hearing these pastimes, we do get attracted. And Narada Muni is speaking from his own experience. He uses this word in the second line of text 26, that manohara, that hearing those pastimes, it stole away my mind. And yeah, Prabhupada writes in the purport, by hearing the narration of the pastimes of the Lord, one contacts directly the personality of Godhead. So no one can say that, oh yeah, Krishna came 5,000 years ago and performed his pastimes and just to attract us, but I wasn't there. I didn't see them. I didn't see Mother Yashoda. I never got to meet, the gopis and the cowherd. So, don't blame me for not being attracted. Prabhupada's saying, no, hearing the narrations of the pastimes of the Lord is the same thing as seeing them. It's the same thing as if you were there 5,000 years ago when Krishna was performing his Bhoma Vrindavan Leela. You're directly contacting the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then he goes on to say in the purport that the whole idea is that simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes, one can become one of the associates of the Lord. Narada Muni has eternal life, unlimited knowledge, and unfathomed bliss, and he can travel all over the material and spiritual worlds without restriction. One can attain to the highest perfection of life simply by attentive hearing of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord from the right sources, as Narada heard them from the pure devotees, the Bhaktivedantas, in his previous life. The process of hearing and the association of devotees is especially recommended in the age of quarrel, Kali Yuga. So he's saying that we can all, by hearing the topics of the Lord, we can all attain the same perfection that Narada attained in his previous lifetime. And we can all become personal associates of the Lord just by hearing those pastimes. So it's very, very important. Okay, text 27, please.
तस्मिन् तदा लब्धुरुचेर्महामते प्रियश्वस्य अस्खालिता मतिर्मम ययाहम् एतत् सत् असत् स्वमायया पश्ये मयि ब्राह्मणी कल्पितं परे. O great sage, as soon as I got a taste of the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear of the Lord was unflinching. As my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings, for both the Lord and I are transcendental.
So here we're seeing that not only is Narada's in his past life, not only is his taste increasing, but his he says, my attention to hear the Lord was unflinching, askalita mati, that unwavering, with unwavering mind or intelligence, or attention. So due to that taste, then his intelligence became very steadily fixed on the Lord. And also, he's getting a philosophical understanding. So from Bhakti comes knowledge, transcendental knowledge. And by that transcendental knowledge, he's realizing that he is a transcendent spiritual being. He's not a product of matter. That the gross and subtle material bodies are also Krishna's energy, and they're meant to be used in Krishna's service. But that he's not those things. They're just kind of resources at his disposal to serve Krishna. So I'm going to read a little from the end of the purport here. Prabhupada writes, the gross body should be engaged in acts of rendering service to the Lord, as in bringing water, cleansing the temple, or making obeisances, etc. The path of archana, or worshiping the Lord in the temple, involves engaging one's gross body in the service of the Lord. So, yeah, he speaks of, these are the practical ways of engaging the gross body. Then he says, similarly, the subtle mind should be engaged in hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, thinking about them, chanting his name, etc. All such activities are transcendental. None of the gross or subtle senses should be otherwise engaged. Such realization of transcendental activities is made possible by many, many years of apprenticeship in the devotional service. But simply attraction of love for the personality of Godhead, as it was developed in Narada Muni by hearing, is highly effective. So, after many, many years of practicing devotional service, then we come to this stage of love for Krishna, like Narada Muni did by hearing. And at that stage, then we understand very clearly that there's no other use for this gross or subtle bodies than serving Krishna in different ways. And he's mentioning here direct services, like all the different processes of archana. That's why archana is so nice, because a lot of the 9 processes of devotional service are for the mind, more for the mind. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. It's all for the mind. Hearing, chanting, remembering. You can just be sitting there, your gross body's not, of course your ears are engaged, your tongue is engaged, but as far as the rest of your body is more or less not really very much engaged by a lot of the 9 processes of devotional service. But others also, like Vandanam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam, they're more like subtle processes. But then Archanam is good, because Archanam is completely engaging of the gross body, doing so many things. You have to collect ingredients, you have to cook, you have to, offer arti and do this and do that. And, the pujaris are always running around. The pujaris are never just like sitting there, in one place for very long. They're always up and around and getting things and doing things and going here and going there, on the altar, off the altar, in the kitchen, out of the kitchen, washing this, cleaning that. So yeah, Archana is very good for engagement of the gross body. And then the mind engages in all the other activities, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. And then, of course, other activities for the gross body are dasyam, serving the Lord, serving the servants of the Lord, like that. But the point here is that by hearing, then we come to understand that that we are transcendental beings and that we're meant to be engaged in transcendental activities, direct constitutional activities of serving the Lord. And that we can do so with our bodies, although we're not these bodies. These bodies are very useful tools for engaging in Krishna's service. So we can make the best use of a bad bargain by engaging in Krishna's service. Someone please read text 20, which one are we on? 28.
Itham sharat prarvashika vritu hare Vrishena vato menu savam yashomalam Sankirtayamanam munibhir mahatmabhi Bhakti pravarta marjastamopaha. Thus, during 2 seasons, the rainy season and autumn, I had the opportunity to hear these great-souled sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories of the Lord Hari. As the flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of the modes of passion and ignorance vanished.
Jai, thank you. Yeah, so for 4 whole months, he says he was constantly hearing the spotless glories of the Lord, Yasha Amalam, of Krishna, Hare, specifically mentions here, Hare, of Krishna. And he's very emphatic about how constant his hearing was, because he says, Vishrinvata, which Prabhupada translates continuously hearing, and then Anusavam, which means constantly. So he was constantly and continuously, looks like he was doing nothing but hearing as time went by. Because why? Because his taste was so strong. He had so much ruchi. His attraction for hearing was so strong that he didn't want to do anything except hear. And it looks like those Bhaktivedantas, they also had a similar attachment for hearing, taste for hearing, because he was hearing from them, so they must have been speaking. The talks, Krishna Katha was going on all the time, and he just wanted to be there all the time, and he was there all the time. So, and yeah, he says that those great sages, Munibi, who were all great souls, Mahatmabi, chanted and discussed the topics of Krishna together. And he uses the word Sankirtyamanam. So they were doing this was their Sankirtan, that together they were doing Kirtan, Hari Kirtan, by speaking Hari Katha. And as a result of his bhakti, that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Narada Muni uses the word here, bhakti, in the last line. He says that indicates prema bhakti. So as a result of his prema bhakti, which began to flow, right? Pravrita means to flow. Then that prema destroyed all of his rajas and tamas. And yeah, that verse, tada rajas tamo bhava, that devotional service removes the influence of passions and passion and ignorance and all of its effects, and situates the person in pure goodness. But it looks like Narada Muni in his previous life is already above that. He's like already on prema. And Srila Prabhupada, he compares the flow of bhakti or prema to the flow of a river. He says here in the purport, as the river flows on till she reaches the sea, similarly pure devotional service flows by the association of pure devotees till it reaches the ultimate goal, namely transcendental love of God. Such a flow of devotional service cannot stop. On the contrary, it increases more and more without limitation. The flow of devotional service is so potent that any onlooker also becomes liberated from the influence of the modes of passion and ignorance. These two qualities of nature are thus removed, and the living being is liberated, being situated in his original position. So just imagine a river, very strong, fast-flowing, deep river, and it's flowing. So when a river flows through, it just, it washes away everything. it just washes everything downstream. Especially like, if let's say if a river changes course. So there may have been other things there. There may have been somebody's, farmer's field or somebody's house or roads or, trees, all kinds of things that were happening on the land. But when the river changes course, it just wipes out everything. Everything's just swept away. The trees, the house, the fields, everything. It's just gone. So in the same way, the river of devotional service, especially Prema Bhakti, when it flows, it just washes away all the influence of passion and ignorance, all of the anarthas of our lives, all of our material attachments, all of our misconceptions and upadhis, misidentifications. They all just get wiped away. And as the river flows, it increases. And that we were talking about this as it goes. River from its source starts off small, but as it keeps going, it's increasing. The water, more water is flowing into it from different sources, and everything is just, it's picking up, it's increasing in volume, and it's increasing in its force. So as we go on in our practice of bhakti, it becomes more forceful. And so the changes that it makes in our lives are increasing. Sometimes we feel actually like in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, when we first become devotees, there's such a dramatic transformation, that we go from somebody doing all kinds of nonsense to, very clean lifestyle and totally change our habits. But, and it looks like a big change. And afterwards, we may feel like we're not really progressing much. We're kind of just going on with things the way that we were. But the bhakti, the changes that take place as we go on, it doesn't get less, it actually gets more. But those changes are of a different nature, because in the beginning, the changes, they're mainly external. And so they're more visible. For example, we changed our diet. If we were eating meat, we became vegetarians, taking only Krishna prasadam. We changed our clothes. We started wearing saris and dhotis and tilak, and maybe having a different hairstyle as well. And, we changed our activities, and, we changed the time that we wake up in the morning. So it looks like a huge transformation, but most of those transformations are external. So they're not actually so significant as the transformations that happen later, which are internal, the changes of our consciousness. And we may feel that we're not changing very much because we don't see it. We just don't see it. And because we're accustomed to, seeing is believing, we're accustomed to just, that if there's no material progress happening, then there's no progress. Then we don't perceive the amazing, astounding ways actually in which we're actually progressing internally, as far as the purification that's going on, the attraction that's awakening, the way our perspective of the world is changing, our understanding and appreciation of Krishna and his qualities and pastimes is deepening. So all that is going on, and those are the real changes. Those are the changes that we're looking for. When we go through the higher levels in the progression of bhakti, these stages from Shraddha to Prema, the later stages, it's all internal. It's just all internal. The first ones, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, those are external. But then the effects that they have are all internal. Anartana vritti, Nishta, Ruchi, Asakti, Bhava, Prema. Those are things that we don't see, but they're big. Those are the powerful things. Those are actually the things. That's when the river is really having a lot of force. But in the beginning, when a river is just coming from its source, it's usually in the mountains. And so if you've ever been to Gangotri, we were staying in a guest house, one of those little hotel things, right next to the river in Gangotri. And it's like, it's so loud. It's like roaring, all day, all night. You just hear this constantly. You can barely even hear each other. You have to like shout to have a conversation with each other, because the river, or if you know the sound, if you sit next to a waterfall or something, it's just roaring like that all the time. But then if you go to the Ganga, like down lower, like, by the time it gets to Mayapur or something, you don't hear anything. It's just slow, but it's so deep. At ISKCON Mayapur, the Ganga that we see, it's only a small part of the Ganga. It's only like there's a dam that's further up at a place called Faraka. And there they divide the Ganga. There's a big dam, and most of it goes to Bangladesh, and just a small part goes, through ISKCON Mayapur. So what we see there is just small. But if you go to that place, I think it's called Faraka or New Faraka or something like that. If you go there and see the Ganga, it's so wide. It's like you can almost not see the other side of it. It's quite shocking, actually, how big the Ganga is. And then it continues getting bigger, after that. But it's very quiet. So initially the changes, the transformations that we experience in Bhakti, they're making a lot of noise. They're very apparent. Like, you're very conscious that the river is flowing because you can hear it. You're conscious that some changes in your life are happening because you see them. But then later it's quiet. It's very internal. You don't see what's going on, but it's bigger, it's deeper, and it's having more effects even than the beginning stages. So it has a cumulative effect. So don't think, as long as we continue faithfully hearing, chanting, serving devotees, trying our best to be pure devotees and to please Krishna, don't think you're not making advancement, making so much advancement, every day more advancement. Just that we don't see it. But Krishna sees it. And Krishna rewards it all. And we're going to get there. We're on the way. Okay. Yes, let's go to text. Actually, let's take a break. We'll take a little break here and we'll continue from text 29. So let's just stop for 10 minutes and we'll be back here soon. All right, Krishna. Or actually, we can make it, we're almost approaching, here it's 3 minutes to 8. So there it's probably 3 minutes to something 30, whatever time it is there for you. So let's just start at what'll be 40 minutes past the hour for you, right? Okay, so that'll be a 13-minute break. Jai, see you soon. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back. I remembered something that I wanted to say here about that river analogy. Is well, Prabhupada mentions this too. He says, the flow of devotional service is so potent that any onlooker also becomes liberated from the influences of the modes of passion and ignorance. So, yeah, it's just nice. We were talking about how Bhakti, like this river that removes all of our attachments and anarthas and everything like that, and just it just moves us, it just carries us forward progressively towards the lotus feet of Krishna. And the amazing thing is that as we're, caught up in this flow of bhakti, then others also get caught up into it too. They also get swept up by our enthusiasm in devotional service. So, as long as we keep practicing bhakti, then that inspires others to keep practicing bhakti. And when they see how we're feeling, and they see our inspiration to serve Krishna, they also become inspired. So in this way, that river of bhakti, especially when it comes to very high levels, prema bhakti, becomes so forceful that it even sweeps up other people. And we can see that, when a very pure devotee comes to visit, then everybody just gets enlivened, enthused. Everybody just wants to be a pure devotee and chant pure holy names and, hear about Krishna and like that. It's inspiring. So we get caught up in other devotees' bhakti. And so each of us also, as we advance, we're affecting others around us. They're also getting swept up in our enthusiasm. So the more enthusiastic we are, the more inspired we are, the more eager we are, the more other people are also going to develop those qualities. It's not just that we're, like a lone ship in the night or something, but we're all together. And so there's a current that's flowing, that our bhakti might, it's kind of like, actually, when I was teaching at school at Mayapur, they had this little swimming pool, and they used to do this thing called swirly. So the kids would get in the pool. This is funny. The kids would get in the pool and they would all start running around in a circle. It was a circular pool. So they would start running around in the circle, and then their running would make the water start moving around in a circle like a whirlpool. So they'd get this big whirlpool going, and then they would stop running and they would just float, and they would all be swirling around in a circle in the current that they had created by their running. So imagine if one of them wasn't running. Maybe one of them was just standing in the middle, right? But everybody else running creates a current. So that person in the middle, if they also float for a second, they're also going to start moving around in a circle. So it's like that. But if we just keep running in our Krishna consciousness, like full speed ahead, tivrena bhakti yogena, doing like forceful execution of devotional service, then other people are it's going to create a current. It's going to create a bhakti current that other people are going to get caught up in, and they're also going to get moved closer to Krishna as a result of the current that we created by our service. So it's a nice way that we can get others involved, is just by being good devotees and being enthusiastic devotees, and that also encourages others. All right. Good. So let's go to text 20. Let's read 29 and 30 together. Someone.
Tasya evam me anuraktasya pravrishtasya hataynasa radhadanasya balasya dantasya anucharasya cha. I was very much attracted to those sages. I was gentle in behavior and all my sins were eradicated in their service. In my heart, I had strong faith in them. I had subjugated the senses and I was strictly following them with body and mind. Jnanam guhyatamam yattat sakshat bhagavato ditam Anvavocham Kamishyanta Kripaya Dina Vatsala. As they were leaving, those Bhakti Vedants, who are very kind to poor-hearted souls, instructed me in that most confidential subject, which is instructed by the personality of Godhead himself.
Thank you, Bru. So here Narada is describing his qualities in text 29, and how there was a mutual affection between himself and those Bhaktivedantas. So because he was gentle and pure and faithful and self-disciplined and trying his best to follow their example with body and mind, then because they were Dina Vatsala, naturally kind to the poor and meek, they saw him as a suitable candidate for their mercy, for their kripa. Kripaya Dina Vatsala. And so let's just read a little bit here. At the end of 29 purport says, a neophyte devotee must faithfully serve the pure devotee, and he should be very much obedient and strictly follow the instructions. These are signs of a devotee who is determined to achieve success even in the existing duration of life. So this is what Narada was doing in his previous lifetime. He was very faithfully serving them. He was obedient, following their instructions. And because of this, then he became very dear to them. So when senior devotees see that a junior devotee is trying very hard to do the right thing, is really making their best effort to get up early in the morning and chant their japa nicely in the temple room in the association of devotees, and they're really making an endeavor to improve themselves and to practice bhakti nicely in a disciplined way, then that person becomes a natural object of mercy for any senior devotee. They'll be like, oh, such a good boy or girl, they're really trying so hard to be a devotee. Krishna, please help them to overcome their obstacles. Please inspire them so that they can make rapid progress. And because senior devotees are, especially very pure devotees, they're naturally inclined that way. They're naturally compassionate. That's what it says here, Dina Vatsala. They're naturally very kind to anybody who's, in an unfortunate situation, but trying to connect to Krishna. So when a senior devotee sees any glimmer of sincerity, then they're going to pray, they're going to want to help, they're going to want to give blessings, and like that to that person. They become a suitable candidate for their mercy. So then before leaving the place, because now the rainy season was over, the 4 months of the rainy season had finished, and they were going to continue their travels because they were like mendicant, like sannyasis. So before leaving, they imparted to him the most confidential knowledge. He says, Jnanam Guhyatamam. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that, and Prabhupada also comments in his purport, that there are different levels of confidential scriptures. There's confidential, more confidential, and most confidential. And so the confidential, or the Shastra Guhyam, are those scriptures which are predominantly Gyan, but mixed with Bhakti. And those can take one up to the level of impersonal Brahman realization. And then the more confidential ones are Shastra Guhyataram. And those are predominantly Bhakti, but they still have a little bit of Jnana, a little bit of Gyan mixed in with them. And those can take one up to Paramatma realization. And then the most confidential, the Shastra Guhyatamam, which is mentioned here, are those scriptures which deal only with pure bhakti. And they can take one all the way up to Bhagavan realization, the highest realization of God, which includes all the other features or understandings of Krishna. So this Shastra Guhyatamam, or Jnana Guhyatamam, is what the Bhaktivedantas gave to Narada in his previous life. And he says here that that knowledge is Sakshat Bhagavatoditam, directly spoken by the Lord himself. And an example of this is the knowledge that was spoken by Krishna to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. And another example is that spoken by Krishna to Uddhava in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and also which the Lord speaks to Lord Brahma in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So just looking at Bhagavad Gita, we know that this language is also used about Jnanam Guhyatamam, talking about the most confidential knowledge. And of course, chapter 9 is entitled the most confidential knowledge. And that's what Krishna starts off saying it is. He says, idam tu te guhyatamam. It's the same word. And he says, and he also says that I'm giving you this most confidential knowledge because of your devotional qualifications, because you're never envious of me. And that's the same thing that the Bhaktivedanta is, because Narada in his last life, he was gentle, he was not sinful, he had faith in them, and he was not envious of them, basically. Because he had good qualities, then they was giving him the most confidential knowledge. And Krishna is telling Arjuna the same thing. Because you have good qualities, because you are, anasuyave, then I'm going to give you the guhyatamam, the highest transcendental knowledge. And what is that? Then he says in the next verse, Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam. This confidential knowledge is the knowledge of devotional service. And then he goes on in 9:14, he gives knowledge. So chapter 9 is full of all different aspects of the Jnanam Guhyatamam, or most confidential knowledge. So one aspect is the activities of the devotees. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantas chadridavrataha namasyantas tamam bhaktya niti yukta upasate. So this is very confidential, what pure devotees do. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before Krishna. These great souls perpetually worship Krishna with devotion. And he also speaks about his relationship with Krishna, gives knowledge of how he pervades the world. Mayam tatam idam sarvam jagat avyakta murtinam. And he gives knowledge of how his energies work in the world. Maya dyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kunteya jagat viparivartate. And then he gives knowledge of his relationship with his devotees, how he protects them and how he maintains them. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana parupasate tesham nityaviyuktanam yogakshema bahamyaham. And that for his devotees, anyone who worships him with exclusive devotion, meditating on his transcendental form, Krishna carries what they lack and preserves what they have. And then he gives knowledge of how simple devotional service is, how easy it is to please him with bhakti. Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakti prayachati. And then he tells us how he gives knowledge of how to connect all one's activities to Krishna. Yat karosi yadashnasi yad jahosi dadasi yat yat tapasyasi konteya tat kurusva manarpanam. And then he gives knowledge of how, even though Krishna is equal to everyone, he's partial to his devotees. So this is very confidential because everyone thinks, oh, Krishna is equal to everyone. So he's like, yeah, samoham sarvabhuteshu name dvesho sina priyaha. But there's a big but there, that he says that, but those who render service unto me in devotion are friends, are in me, and I'm also friends to them. So they are my special friends. So I'm actually partial to my devotees. And then he gives knowledge of how his devotees are so dear to him that even if they do something wrong, even if they commit the most abominable activity, Krishna is not going to tolerate anyone criticizing them. Anyone criticizing them. He insists that they should still be considered saintly. Apichat sudaracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadur eva samantavya samyak vyavasito isa. That they should still be considered sadhus. And then he gives knowledge of how his devotees are so dear to him. Sorry, he gives knowledge of that of how Krishna, of how he won't leave a devotee, even in a fallen condition, like we were hearing yesterday. But he always makes some arrangement to rectify and uplift them. And that's what he says in the next verse. Kshipram bhavati dharmatya shashvat shantim nigachati konteya pratijani hi name bhakta pranashyati. That he quickly becomes righteous, even after falling down. He quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. Why? Because my devotee never perishes. Just tell everyone, make it clear, my devotee never perishes. I protect them. And he gives knowledge that it doesn't matter who you are or what you've done, anyone can take shelter of him and attain the supreme destination. Mam hi parta vyapasrita ye pisu papan yonaya striyo vaishyastatashu dras tepi yanti param gatim. And then finally, he gives knowledge how just by thinking of him, always thinking of him with devotion, one can attain him without a doubt. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vaishyasi yuktvaevam atmana matparayanaha. And then later in Bhagavad Gita 1864, Krishna says that, so these things that we just were discussing, these verses from chapter 9, this is the guhyatamam, the most confident, the jnanam guhyatamam, the most confidential knowledge that's, what's he, Sakshat Bhagavatoditam, that was spoken by the Lord himself. It's the same knowledge that was given by the Bhaktivedantas to Narada. And then, so all these different aspects of knowledge that I was just reading out in the different Bhagavad Gita, they're all just different aspects of the most confidential knowledge. But then in 1864, Krishna says, Sarva Guhyatamam, that out of all the Guhyatamams, out of all the confidential aspects of knowledge, the most confidential aspect, even out of the other most confidential aspects, the supremely most confidential aspect, the parama vacha, so he uses that word, parama vacha, the supreme instruction, is the same one that he just said at the end of, that he concluded chapter 9 with, and that's when he repeats it in the next verse. Mamana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vaishyasi satyam te pratijane priyosime. So he's very emphatic about this. But then again, what it comes down to, what this all boils down to, is that, okay, the supreme, the most, the sarva guhyatamam, out of all of the jnana guhyatamams, is that we always need to think of Krishna. But how are we going to always think of Krishna if we don't know about Krishna? So someone needs to tell us about Krishna, his name, form, qualities, and pastimes. We need the Srimad Bhagavatam. You need to do this, Vyasadeva. Like this is what it's all leading to. So then in text 31, now Narada is going to give his personal realization again on this, in this matter. So someone please read text 31.
Yenevaham bhagavato vasudevasya vedasaha maya nibhu bhavam avidam yen gachanti tatpadam. By that confidential knowledge, I could understand clearly the influence of the energy of Lord Sri Krishna, the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of everything. By knowing that, one can return to him and personally meet him.
Jai, thank you. So yeah, so Narada is saying, he's giving his own testimony that I heard this confidential knowledge. I heard this jnanam guhyatamam from those Bhaktivedantas. And by their mercy, I was able to understand it. And in that way, I could realize who Krishna is in Tattvata. I could realize the science of God. I could realize that Krishna is the absolute truth, the creator, the maintainer, the annihilator of everything. And not only that, but I could go back to him and I could personally meet him. So this is, now Narada's talking about how after leaving his body, he actually went and personally met the Lord. So you can imagine what Vyasadeva was thinking. Vyasadeva was like, whoa, that's like, how did that happen? How did you meet Krishna? How did you go back to Krishna? What was that like? Like, how did it feel to personally meet Krishna? So he's going to start the next chapter, inquiring further, like, so what happened? You know, what happened after those Bhaktivedantas left? How did your life play out after that? And how did you get to be who you are now? He wants to know all the details because he gives a little foreshadowing here, saying that, yeah, I heard and I took it to heart. And as a result, I got to personally meet Krishna. Haribol. So Prabhupada writes here, the Lord desires, as he has directly said in the Bhagavad Gita, that all conditioned souls rotting in the kingdom of material energy come back to him by giving up all engagements in the material world. This is the most confidential part of knowledge. But this can be understood only by the pure devotees, and only such devotees enter the kingdom of God to see him personally and serve him personally. The concrete example is Narada himself, who attained this stage of eternal knowledge and eternal bliss. And the ways and means are open to all, provided one agrees to follow in the footsteps of Narada Muni. Yeah, so this thing of going back to Godhead and personally meeting Krishna, Prabhupada says, the Lord desires this. This is what the Lord wants. He wants us to go back to him and personally meet him and shake his hand, like he says to Brahma. Could shake hands with the Lord. He doesn't want us to rot here in the kingdom of the material energy. So we just have to give up all of our engagements here in the material dimension and just go back to him. That's what Krishna wants. And so, by practicing bhakti, we can do that. And Narada Muni did that. And Prabhupada is saying that anybody who follows in the footsteps of Narada Muni can also do that. So that's very encouraging for all of us. Right, let's go to text 32.
Etat samsuchitam brahmam stapatraya chikisitam yadishvare bhagavati karma brahmani bhavitam. Translation. O Brahmana Vyasadeva, it is decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, sorry. So here, Narada Muni's, what he's going to do in the next few verses is he's going through the gradual, the stages of elevation from karma yoga to bhakti yoga, to pure bhakti yoga. So this verse here is, he says, karma brahmani bhavitam. That this is speaking about karma yoga. Not for karmis, so it's not karma yoga for karmis, but it's for those who are desiring to be bhaktas, but who are still attached to the particular work that they do in the material world, attached to their prescribed duties, the particular dharma, according to like varnashram dharma, like acting according to their psychophysical nature, their conditioned activities according to their natures. So what Narada Muni is saying is that you have to dedicate those activities to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's karma yoga. And that by doing so, you can be freed from all the troubles and miseries of material life. And Prabhupada says in the purport, Sri Narada Muni personally experienced that the most feasible and practical way to open the path of salvation or get relief from the miseries of life is to hear submissively the transcendental activities of the Lord from the right and bona fide sources. This is the only remedial process. So yeah, even to know how to connect our activities to the Lord, we need to know about the Lord, because otherwise, how are we going to connect our activities to him? And why would we? Like, why would we be inspired to do that if we didn't know him, if we didn't know, how wonderful he is? So, yeah, Prabhupada emphasizes here that, I'll just read more here from the purport. The entire material existence is full of miseries. And that's because foolish people, they've manufactured all these ways of living that are against the will of Krishna. And so they experience miseries as a result. And then they try to solve their problems by more concoctions. And that just increases the miseries. They're trying to remove the miseries, but they're just increasing their miseries by their so-called solutions. So, yeah, Prabhupada says the whole world is struggling very hard to exist out of these miseries, but men do not know that without the sanction of the Lord, no plan or remedial measure can actually bring about the desired peace or tranquility. The remedial measure to cure a patient by medical treatment is useless if it is not sanctioned by the Lord. To cross the river or ocean by a suitable boat is no remedial measure if not sanctioned by the Lord. We should know for certain that the Lord is the ultimate sanctioning officer, and we must therefore dedicate our attempts to the mercy of the Lord for ultimate success, or to get rid of the obstacles on the path of success. So, yeah, we can't do anything without the sanction of the Lord. He's saying peace strategies won't work without the sanction of the Lord. Medicine will not cure you without the sanction of the Lord. Even a river, even a boat cannot cross the river without the sanction of the Lord. Everything needs the Lord's sanction. And so, because everything depends on Krishna's sanction, then we should just dedicate all of our activities to the Lord and just completely depend on him. And that way we'll be free from all of our miseries. Because knowingly or unknowingly, we're depending on him anyway, because nothing can happen without him. So we need him. If we want to be successful in anything, even material things, we are depending on Krishna. So karma yoga basically means recognizing that and offering everything to him, because it's only by him that we can do anything. So because it's basically he who's doing everything, then the results of that work, which is done by him through us, is actually his, right? It's like, the example is that if there's a proprietor, like a person who owns a homeowner, okay, so they own the home, but let's say they want to build an addition onto their house. They want to make an extension, add a new room because they have another child in the family. They need more space. Okay, so they hire a builder. They hire a construction company to build the addition. And so, they hire the people, they give them the plan, they pay them the money, they provide all the materials like that, and the builder builds the addition. So then, but it's not that the builder can't come and say, oh, I made this beautiful thing, it's mine, I'm just going to move in here now with my family. No, it belongs to the householder, the homeowner, because it was only by their sanction and their empowerment and their resources and their desire that it happened in the first place. So no one's going to, have a chance at claiming that they made it just because they did it. So in the same way, everything that we do depends on Krishna. Krishna is financing it. He's empowering it. He's giving us the resources to do it, the strength to do it, the intelligence to do it, the ability to do it. They all come from him. And so whatever we do, it's his, it's not ours. So we need to recognize that and offer everything to him. Otherwise, it's like, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that one who doesn't offer things to the Lord is just a thief. And if someone's a thief, then they can't be happy, because being a criminal is not a happy life. You can't have peace, and without peace, you can't have happiness. So when we recognize the actual situation, offer everything back to Krishna, understanding that it's his, like he says, Ishavasya midam sarvam, then we can actually be peaceful and we can be happy. And that's how we can be free from that. So that's why Narada is saying this is the remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries. Because Krishna is pleased. Okay. All right, let's go on to text 33. Text 33 and 34 are all about how this karma yoga that Narada just described leads to liberation. So just read 33 for now.
Amyo yashacha bhutanam jayate yena suvrata tadeva hayamyam dravyam na punati chikitsatam. Translation: O good soul, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this is a very nice point. The idea is that our material disease and consequent suffering are due to using material things for our sense gratification. But if we connect the same material things to Krishna in the service of Krishna through karma yoga, then our material disease will be cured. And in the purport, the Prabhupada gives some, someone needs to mute. Yeah, thanks. Prabhupada gives some other similar analogies that make the same point in the purport. He says that just like milk can cause a digestive disorder if you drink too much milk, but the same milk, when it's slightly adjusted, when it's made into yogurt, will cure the same disorder that the milk caused. And he says that like iron, when it's placed in fire, can act like fire. So matter, when used in devotional service, it no longer has the qualities of iron, but it turns into a spiritual force by the will of Krishna. So in the same way that when we engage material things, when we engage our material senses, mind and intelligence and speech in the service of the Lord, then those things become no longer a cause for material bondage, but they become a cause for liberation. And that's the point here, that Krishna turns all of our activities into spirit. They're all spiritualized. They all become spiritual forces by the will of Krishna. And those forces push us forward. Like we were talking about the river. The river has a lot of force and it just moves us forward, moves everything forward, washes everything away, brings others along with it. So that happens when we just, as soon as we connect to Krishna, then that spiritual force becomes a very active principle in our lives, moving everything and everyone towards Krishna. Okay, then text 34, Narada is going to continue the same point. So someone please read that.
Evam nirnam kriya yoga sarve samsriti hetava ta evatma vinashaya kalpante kalpita pare. Thus, when all a man's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which caused his perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of work.
Okay, so here he uses the word Kriya Yoga, which is a synonym for Karma Yoga. And Srila Prabhupada explains that the important thing here is changing our desire. And Prabhupada picks up on this analogy, the tree of work, the kalpante kalpita pare. Sorry. Oh no, so I saw kalpita and I was thinking kalpataru, but that's not how it's translated here. The word atma, Prabhupada translates as tree of work. It must be the way the acharyas commented on it. In any case, Prabhupada picks up on this idea of tree of work. And in his purport, he refers to the banyan tree of material existence, which is mentioned in the beginning of the 15th chapter. And in a purport there, Prabhupada says that the banyan tree of material existence is situated on desire, in the same way that, a tree that's growing beside a lake, the reflection of the tree is situated in the water. So he said that the same way that reflected tree is situated on the water, the perverted reflection, in other words, our illusory existence in this material world, that banyan tree which represents it, is situated on desire, the desire to enjoy the fruits of our work. But when our desire is shifted to a desire to serving the mission of Krishna, then that brings about detachment, because service, bhakti, brings about causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. And then that detachment, Prabhupada explains in Bhagavad Gita 15:3, becomes the axe for chopping down that banyan tree and ending our material existence. It's called asanga shastrena, not shastra, but shastrena, the weapon. So asanga means detachment, and shastrena means the weapon. So the knowledge that comes from serving Krishna, due to a desire to serve Krishna, due to shifting our desire to the service of Krishna, that becomes the weapon that cuts down the tree of our material existence. So that's how karma yoga leads to liberation. There's a shifting of the desire, that my desire is, or my goal, the desire and also the goal are very closely linked. So my goal is no longer to satisfy my senses through my activity. My goal is to please Krishna through my work. And because of that desire now to please Krishna, then Krishna rewards one with detachment, and then that becomes the axe that chops down one's cycle of repeated birth and death, so that now one is free, one is liberated and can go back to Godhead. So here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he summarizes this process, that first of all, we seek association with pure devotees. Then we serve them faithfully and lovingly. And as a result of that, they bestow their blessings, their mercy. And then from that, we develop their transcendental qualities. And because they have taste for hearing, then we also become attached to hearing about Krishna. And then as a result of hearing, we come to understand our eternal relationship with Krishna. And then the grand finale is that we can personally meet Krishna, just as Narada did. So Prabhupada goes through that sequence in the purport. So yeah, he says, the conclusion is that when the results of all fruitive and other work is dovetailed with the service of the Lord, it will cease to generate further karma and will gradually develop into transcendental devotional service, which will not only cut off completely the root of the banyan tree of work, but will also carry the performer to the lotus feet of the Lord. So that's very inspiring. And it's very practical. That's the great thing about bhakti, is it's so practical. Everybody's doing some work. So just do it for Krishna, yad karosi. Just do it as an offering to Krishna. And by doing that, we won't get karma. We'll be free from the karma bandhana, be free from the bondage of work, karmic bondage. And then we'll gradually develop, that karma yoga will gradually develop into bhakti yoga by the mercy of the Lord, because of our sincerity, because of our desire. And by connecting anything with Krishna, we become purified. So we're gradually becoming purified. And then that we'll develop detachment. And then it just totally, our connection, our entanglement with this material world becomes cut. It's like the knot, the hridaya granthi, the knot that binds us to the cycle of birth and death just gets cut. And then we can go. It's like when people bring a boat into the port, they tie these strong knots to tie it up to the pier so that the boat doesn't drift away, it can't go anywhere. So like we're tied with these strong knots to material life. And if someone comes and unties the knot or cuts the rope, then the boat can go. The boat can sail across the ocean of repeated birth and death. So that's what we want to do, and that's what we can do. And it's so easy. It's just so practical. Just change the desire. You don't need to change anything else. You don't need to quit your job and stop your work or drop out of school. All you need to do, you can if you want, but you don't need to do that. You can just keep doing what you're doing and change your desire, because it's all about the consciousness. International Society for Krishna Consciousness. That's what we're after. We're after Krishna consciousness. It's not about the activities that you do. It's about the consciousness and developing a consciousness of Krishna. And that's what makes everything perfect and purifying and elevating and liberating. Okay, so text 35. Now we're going to move up. So far last few verses, we've been talking about karma yoga or kriya yoga and how that leads to liberation. So now he's going to talk about Bhakti Mishra, how Bhakti Mishra karma leads to Bhakti Mishra jnana. All right, go ahead and read text 35 and we'll talk about it.
Yadatra kriyate karma bhagavat paritoshanam jnanam yattad adhinam hi bhakti yoga samanvitam. Translation. Whatever work is done here in this life for the satisfaction of the mission of the Lord is called Bhakti Yoga, or transcendental love and service of the Lord. And what is called knowledge becomes a concomitant factor. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so you can see here in this verse that it's starting off with work. Whatever work is done here in this life for the satisfaction of the Lord. So when we work for the satisfaction of the Lord, then it's technically called karma yoga. And that's what's mentioned in the Yat Atra Kriyate Karma. So, I mean, Prabhupada is calling it, Prabhupada tends to do this all throughout the Bhagavad Gita. He does the same thing, right? Everything's Bhakti Yoga. He just wants us to focus on Bhakti Yoga. But I mean, here, when it's connected to, so the idea is that the activities are done so that kriyate karma, the activities that we perform in this world, are done for the purpose of Bhagavat Paritoshanam, for the purpose of giving a satisfaction to the Lord, Bhagavan. And so that is, that's Bhakti Mishra Karma. So Prabhupada is saying Bhakti Yoga, Bhakti is there because we're trying to satisfy the Lord. And that's basically what Karma Yoga is. Karma Yoga in the beginning stages is, the focus is more on the karma. And then because of the yoga, because of the connection to Krishna, because yoga means to link or to connect. So because of the purifying effects of connecting to Krishna, then gradually the bhakti gradually increases, the bhakti component gradually increases. And Prabhupada says that, makes the point that nothing can happen without bhakti. Like there'll be no advancement without bhakti. If someone is just doing karma without a connection to Krishna, without any tinge of bhakti, they're not going to advance. Then it's not going to lead one to liberation. If one is just doing gyan, also, they're not going to go back to Godhead that way. There needs to be, and even in gyan, they're not going to make advancement without a little bit of bhakti. So what he's talking about here is karma or karma yoga, which is mixed with bhakti, where the mixture of bhakti is becoming a little more prominent. There's little, it started with just a drop of bhakti, and now there's like, quite a substantial bit of bhakti, to the point where we're not calling it just karma yoga, we're calling it Bhakti Mishra Karma, because it's noticeable. It's just like if you're mixing paint, let's say you have some, let's say you have green paint, and you want to make a nice, like a nice sort of turquoise color or something. So you start adding blue into the green. And if you just add a drop of blue into the green, it's not going to look like it's not going to make any difference whatsoever. Like you won't perceive it. It's just going to look like green. Even if you put like, depending on the quantity of the volume of green paint you have, let's say you have a big bucket, even if you put a cup full of blue in, you might not notice much difference. But when you put like a substantial part, like a jug full of blue in, then you're going to start to see color change. So in the same way with yoga, if there's just a few little tinge of bhakti, it still just looks like karma yoga. But when the bhakti component is increasing, then you start to notice it. And then we start to call it Bhakti Mishra Karma. It's like, it's green paint with some blue. Like we can see that there's blue in there. It's not just green anymore. So the bhakti has come up to a certain level. So when the bhakti comes up to a certain level, then Narada says, what is called knowledge becomes a concomitant factor. So then, jnanam yattad adhinam hi bhakti yoga samanvitam. So due to the bhakti component, due to that bhakti yoga component, then because we heard that bhakti brings about causeless knowledge and detachment. So then that's how Bhakti Mishra Karma sort of becomes Bhakti Mishra Jnana. Yeah, so let's read a little bit here from the purport. This is towards the middle. The Lord does not want his sons, the living beings, to suffer the threefold miseries of life. He desires that all of them come to him and live with him. But going back to Godhead means that one must purify himself from material infections. When work is performed, therefore, to satisfy the Lord, the performer becomes gradually purified from material affection. This purification means the attainment of spiritual knowledge. Therefore, knowledge is dependent on karma or work done on behalf of the Lord. Other knowledge being devoid of bhakti yoga or satisfaction of the Lord cannot lead one back to the kingdom of God, which means it cannot even offer salvation, as already explained in its connection. So, so this is the progression: karma yoga, and then gradually the bhakti increases, comes bhakti mishra karma, and then because of the bhakti yoga component, then jnanam, transcendental knowledge, starts coming into the equation by the mercy of the Lord, that Krishna's by Krishna's mercy. That Krishna purifies the devotee's heart from all dirty things and then showers the devotee with knowledge. Okay, so now text 36 is continuing with the same progression. So now moving on from Bhakti Mishra Jnana. So now the Bhakti is increasing. So if we go back to the paint analogy, if you started with only green paint and you started adding blue, so now you've added so much blue that the blue has taken over the green. And so now you're not calling it green anymore, you're calling it blue. So before you might have called it a bluish green, now you're calling it a greenish blue, right? So text 36 is Karma Mishra Bhakti. So before it was Bhakti Mishra Karma, and now it's Karma Mishra Bhakti, because now it's mainly Bhakti, but there's just a little tinge of karma in there. Okay, so someone please read text 36.
Gurvana.
Go ahead, Rajiv Gupta, Prabhu.
Kurvana yatra karmani bhagavad shishya satkritah grinanti gunani mani krishna num smaranti cha. Translation: while performing duties according to the order of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one constantly remembers him, his names and his qualities.
All right, so you see here the emphasis, because this is Karma Mishra Bhakti. So now the emphasis is on the Bhakti, that one's constantly remembering Krishna, his names and qualities. But still, there's karma because one is still performing their duties. And the word karma is mentioned here in the first line. Kurvana yatra karmani. While performing one's karma, so karma is still there. But the emphasis is not on the karma, because one's doing their karma, but they're completely absorbed in thought of Krishna. So the main thing is the bhakti, and the karma is just whatever, like it's advised in the second canto, that one should just do the minimum, just do whatever you need to do to live a healthy life, to keep your body and soul together, and focus mainly on devotional service. Focus mainly on Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, the 9 processes of devotional service. And we have a material body, so we have to feed it and have a roof over our heads and provide for our families like that. But just do the minimum, don't make that the main thing in your life. So that's what Prabhupada is saying in the purport. An expert devotee of the Lord can mold his life in such a way that while performing all kinds of duties, either for this or the next life, he can constantly remember the Lord's name, fame, qualities, etc. The order of the Lord is distinctly there in the Bhagavad Gita. One should work only for the Lord in all spheres of life. So this is, yeah, we see here also that this is also an aspect of Srila Prabhupada's mood and mission, that, to teach devotees how to mold their lives in such a way that no matter what they're doing, they can always remember Krishna's name, form, qualities, and pastimes. And this is how we can turn our karma into karma mishra bhakti. And that karma mishra bhakti will very easily and quickly evolve into pure bhakti with no tinges of karma or gyan. And that's Rupa Goswami's definition of pure bhakti, is anya bilashita shunyam jnana karma dhyanavritam, that it's no longer tinged with any gyan or any karma. So it's not karma mishra bhakti, it's not jnana mishra bhakti, it's just bhakti, kevala bhakti, pure devotional service. And so here in text 36, Narada is saying, Grinanti gunanamani, that at that stage one accepts Krishna's name and qualities as like the most important thing to focus on in one's life. That we want to become very absorbed in the name, in the qualities of the Lord, and especially in Kali Yuga, the main way to do that is through the names, chanting the holy names. So now in the next verse, Narada is going to tell us his personal mantra, which consists of the names of the Lord. So this is, I felt that this was very, it's a very intimate exchange between Narada and Vyas, because generally, according to Hari Bhakti Vilas, it's said that one should keep one's personal mantra secret. One should hide one's guru, one's mala, one's mantra, like that. Like Gayatri mantra, we keep it secret, because Hare Krishna mantra is different, because Lord Chaitanya came and gave that, and all the acharyas in Gaudiya Vaishnavism recommend widely distributing the Hare Krishna mantra. Although in previous ages, it may have been highly confidential. But Lord Chaitanya, he broke open the storehouse and gave that. But still, Gayatri mantras we keep secret. And this mantra, which Narada Muni, his personal mantra, it more or less resembles a Gayatri mantra. Oh, but before that, let me just get to sorry, there's a point here in the purport that I wanted to bring out. That was I mentioned Prabhupada's mood and mission, and Prabhupada really in the second, is it the second or the third paragraph of the purport, he's talking about how because the thing is how to make karma yoga into bhakti yoga. And Prabhupada says that he recommends that one way that we can do that is that whatever income we have, whatever monetary income we have, we should contribute towards Krishna conscious activities. He says not less than 50% should be spent to carry out the order of Krishna. But then he says, not only should we give the profit of our earning to this cause, but we must also arrange to preach this call of devotion to others, because that is also one of the orders of the Lord. So those who are doing some, karma, those who are working in their occupations according to Varnashram, or hopefully according to their natures, ideally. But anybody who's out there in the world earning money, they should not only give, Prabhupada says, not less than 50% of the profit, but they should also themselves help with the preaching. They should also arrange to preach this call of devotion, because that's also an order of the Lord. And Prabhupada says that the Lord says that definitely that no one is more dear to him than one who is always engaged in the preaching work of the Lord's holy name and fame all over the world. And then he says, even the scientific discoveries of the material world can be engaged in carrying out his order. So whatever it is that you're doing for your work, even if you're a scientist or whatever, try to use that. If you're a graphic designer, then use that to design like flyers and posters for spreading Krishna consciousness. If you're an engineer, then try to use that to somehow help the needs of the temple or whatever. If you're a doctor, then try to take care of devotees who are having health challenges. So just try to use everything to serve the devotees, to serve the movement, to spread the holy name and fame of Krishna all over the world. And Prabhupada says that, we need to preach this widely and convert unwilling men to become his devotees. He says, Lord Chaitanya has taught a very simple method in this connection. He has taught the lesson for preaching the transcendental message through singing, dancing, and refreshment. As such, 50% of our income may be spent for this purpose. In this fallen age of quarrel and dissension, if only the leading and wealthy persons of society agree to spend 50% of their income in the service of the Lord, as taught by Lord Chaitanya, there is absolute certainty of converting this hell of pandemonium to the transcendental abode of the Lord. This reminds me also of what we discussed yesterday in verse 11, changing the world by spreading Krishna consciousness. I really like this language. This is so like classic Prabhupada, converting this hell of pandemonium to the transcendental abode of the Lord. It really looks like that, right? When you, look at the world, it's just a hell of pandemonium. Prabhupada's phrase. But through Krishna consciousness, just by getting people to sing and dance and take nice refreshments in the form of prasadam, then we can convert this hell of pandemonium to the transcendental abode of the Lord. But of course, all that needs to be financed. So those of you who are doing some karma, then make sure you, one, give some financial contribution so that we can make this happen. And two, jump in there and engage it and do it yourself too. Join in the preaching activities. So this is Srila Prabhupada's mood and mission coming through very strongly in this purport. Because the name was mentioned, because it is mentioned about performing duties, doing karma, and also about the name of the Lord. So he's like, all right, you're doing your karma, but also the focus needs to be on the name. This is Kali Yuga. This is the age of the name. This is the Yuga Dharma, is Harinam. So so do your job, earn money, but all that should go into the name, into chanting the holy name, spreading the holy name, getting people to chant the holy name. All right, and now, so now Narada Muni is going to teach us, or at least tell us, the mantra consisting of the holy names that he himself chants. So someone go ahead and read that transcendental mantra, text 37.
Om Namo Bhagavate Tobhyam Vasudevaya Dhimahi Pradumnaya Anuruddhaya Namah Sankarshanaya Cha. Let us all chant the glories of Vasudeva along with his plenary expansions, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarshan.
Okay, thank you. So in this mantra, the Devata, the worshipful Lord, is Bhagavan. It starts Om Namo Bhagavate Tubhyam. So he establishes that my worshipful deity is the supreme personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that the way that the Chaturvyuha, the 4 expansions, are listed here, it is out of the usual order, because usually it's Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. But here it's Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarshan. So somehow or other, I'm not sure how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur came to this conclusion based on the order, but he says that this order, particular order, indicates that these are not Lord Vishnu's expansions in Vaikuntha, but they're Krishna's expansions in Goloka. So Vasudeva is Krishna, Sankarshan is Balaram, Pradyumna is Krishna's son Pradyumna in Dwarka, and Aniruddha is Krishna's grandson. So these are all related to Krishna in Goloka Dwarka. And Srila Prabhupada also says the same thing. He says these 4 are the aides de camp of Lord Sri Krishna. So, and we see in Krishna's Dwarka Lila that they all assist Krishna. And Balaram's there fighting against the demons in Dwarka. And then Pradyumna, Aniruddha, they're all there assisting Krishna in his Dwarka Lila. So that confirms what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has said, that these are Krishna and his intimate associates, or family members. They're all family members, actually. Krishna and his transcendental Vishnu Tattva family members and forms of the Lord. And so we can see that this mantra, of course, it's not the mantra that we chant. Even our Gayatri mantras are nothing like this. But that's because Narada's mood is different. Because Narada's mood is that he serves Krishna in reverence. He's very attracted to Krishna in Dwarka. And we have those pastimes in the 10th canto where Krishna, or Narada Muni goes to visit Krishna in Dwarka, and he goes to all the different palaces, and he's amazed to see how Krishna's, relating differently in every different palace according to how the queens want him to be as their husband. And that just blows his mind. So Prabhupada speaks in the purport, he explains that there are different varieties of prema according to one's rasa with the Lord. And so Narada Muni, he has this kind of prema, which is called Mahatmya Gyan Prema, love for Krishna, but that has with knowledge that Krishna is the Lord, that knowledge of Krishna's glories and his opulences and the fact that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so this mantra is suitable for him because it's about Krishna and the Dwarka Lila, which Narada Muni is attached to, the key players of the Dwarka Lila. And also it's recognizing that Krishna is Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Whereas our Gayatri mantra, especially the last one, Kama Gayatri, is totally different. The emphasis is on Radha and Krishna. There's nothing there to indicate that Krishna is God. And it's all just about their, sweet, loving pastimes in Vrindavan. Because we're in the line of Lord Chaitanya, and that's what Lord Chaitanya gave. He gave that mood, and the Goswamis passed on that mood, and all of our acharyas passed on that mood to us. And so we accept the mantra in disciplic succession. So that's what we've been given. And Narada Muni, he came before Lord Chaitanya, so he has a different mood, and he has a different mantra, which presumably he received in disciplic succession also. So, I thought it was just very sweet and intimate that Narada was sharing that mantra. Okay, so now, after giving these holy names of the Lord that Narada Muni himself chants, he's going to talk about the importance of worshiping the Lord in the form of transcendental sound. Rukmini, how do you say Vani?
Mataji, Aradhya Bhagavan Vajeta Tanya. So, as you were saying that in the we are getting the mantra in the disciplic succession from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Goswamis like this. So, Mataji, I just as you said as you were explaining Naradji's mantra, you were saying that he knows the tattva also. He knows the transcendental glories also, but if we talk about the gopis, they don't know anything. They know also, and they are not aware of anything. Like rasa is so high in that any rasa, that if we talk about the parental rasa of Mother Yashoda, so that rasa is so high, so they don't remember that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and and gopis also. So Mataji, but if we see our present acharyas, they all know that they are also at the level of they are also they also have attained the love of Krishna, like we can see, or as we see, like so our spiritual masters or present acharyas. So how to understand that what you said, two things differentiate, that Naradji also knows and he got the mantra like this, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we are going towards that way.
Yeah, because Lord Chaitanya came for the purpose, and see, Krishna came to display his pastimes, but then when Krishna came, he also did so many things to prove that he was God, right? So even though Krishna performed his pastimes with the hope that people would be very attracted to those Vrindavan pastimes, the Vraj Leela, and want to enter into Vraj Leela with that mood of Kevala Bhakti, Kevala Prem, but still, most people, they were still, after Krishna's departure, most people were worshiping him with awe and reverence. And Krishna says that love for me that is tinged with awe and reverence is crippled. He says, I don't relish that love so much. So somehow it happened, that I perform these pastimes with people, they just got stuck on this notion that I'm God, that I'm opulent, that I'm supreme person, I'm the creator, I'm just all that. And so I need to change that. I'm going to come again. I didn't fulfill my mission. I didn't achieve what I set out to achieve. I achieved some things, but something's missing. And what's missing is that I want people to develop spontaneous affection for me in Kevala Prem. So then he comes again as Lord Chaitanya for the purpose of, very strongly establishing that, the spontaneous love, or the path of Raganuga Bhakti, basically. And just loving Krishna and not worrying that Krishna is God. So, yeah. So then it's a little confusing because you see our acharyas, especially, if you look at the 6 Goswamis, they're all, Nitya Siddhas. They're all, in that, they're all coming from Goloka Vrindavan, where there's no conception of Krishna as God. And they're all, in the mood of the gopis, being in that rasa themselves. But when they give Krishna consciousness, they give that path, but they also know that Krishna is God. Like, Rupa Goswami, it's like he knows that Krishna is God, and they have to teach that Krishna is God because we need to understand the actual situation, but it's just not so prominent for them. It's like, Prabhupada says that the Uttama Adhikari comes down to the Madhyam level for preaching. So because these, transcendental Nitya Siddha Manjaris from Radha Krishna Leela came down to preach, then they had to come to somewhat to the Madhyam platform. And so in Madhyam Adhikari makes discrimination, that Krishna is God, the devotees are my friends, these innocent people are who I'm going to try to make devotees, and these ignorant people I'm going to avoid. So usually we don't think so. Usually for us, it's like a no-brainer. Yeah, and Madhyam Adhikari understands that Krishna is God. Usually we think the more important distinctions are, who to preach to, who to avoid, who to make friends with, right? But from this perspective, the important thing here is that the Madhyam Adhikari knows that Krishna is God. The Uttama Adhikari, if they're in the Vraj Leela, they don't know that Krishna is God. So actually Rupa Goswami and Sanatana, the 6 Goswamis, they don't know that Krishna is God. But when they come here to preach, they come to the Madhyam platform on which they have to know that Krishna is God, because they have to tell people Krishna is God and you have to surrender to him because he's God. Right? But then following that surrender, then they guide us in such a way that our love for Krishna develops, and it gradually develops to the extent that our love for God eclipses that knowledge that Krishna is God. And then we just love Krishna. Whether he's God or not, doesn't matter. We might still know that he's God somewhere, but it's unimportant. It's like, who cares whether he's God or not? He can be whatever. He can be a plumber, it doesn't matter. I just love him because he's Krishna, because he's wonderful. Does that answer the question?
Yes, Mataji, thank you so much.
Okay, so where are we? Text 38. We didn't read that yet, right? Right, let's read text 38.
Iti murti abhidhanena mantra murtim amurtikam yajate yagya purusham sa samyak darshana puman. Thus, he is the actual seer who worships in the form of transcendental sound representation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, who has no material form.
Okay, thank you. So now after telling Vyasadeva his mantra, Narada explains the purpose of this mantra and of any mantra, which consists of the names of Krishna. So we can also apply this to the Hare Krishna mantra. We can apply this to our Gayatri mantras. He says that this mantra is the Lord himself in the form of transcendental sound. He says that, mantra murtim, and that the Lord's form is not material, it's amurtikam, so he can't be seen by material senses. And that we know from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Atashri Krishna Namadi, Nabhaved Grayam Indriyai. That the Krishna can't be perceived can't be grasped by the indriyais, by the material senses. So by using our tongues, but then by using our tongues, so the next part of that is Sevan Mukhehi Jivado Swayam Eva Sparatyada, that by engaging our tongues in the service of the Lord, by chanting his holy names, by producing this transcendental sound, the mantra murti, then we can come to know or see the Lord. Because the Lord reveals himself to the chanter. Swayam Eva Spuratyada. Krishna reveals himself. He gives us a spurat. He gives us a vision of himself. And Narada Muni says the same thing. Sasamyag darshanam puman. That one actually comes to see the Lord through the process of by worshiping him through transcendental sound. He says, therefore, that this mantra, the Murti Abhidanena, the sound representation of the Lord, is the Yagya Purusha, is the form of the Lord who is to be worshipped. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, the transcendental form of eternal bliss and knowledge can be experienced by our original spiritual senses, which can be revived by chanting the holy mantras or transcendental sound representations. So, yeah, we can't perceive the Lord with our material senses, but we can perceive him with our spiritual senses, our original spiritual senses. And, you know, we're all souls, and the soul has a spiritual form, and that spiritual form has spiritual senses. So we all originally, inherently, eternally have these spiritual senses, and they just need to be revived. And he's saying that they can be revived by chanting the holy mantras. They can be revived by hearing the sound representation of the Lord through mantra. He says such sound should be received from the transparent agency of a bona fide spiritual master, and the chanting may be practiced by the direction of the spiritual master. Yeah, so that chanting has to be received from a living guru in disciplic succession. So yeah, Narada is giving his own personal mantra, but we don't chant this mantra as part of our daily sadhana. We chant the mantras given by our spiritual master in disciplic succession, and the standard that was set by our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, was 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, and then for second initiates, 3 times a day, there's particular Gayatri mantras that were actually selected by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Srila Prabhupada passed them on to us. So that's how we get the mantra. That's the purpose of the mantra, and that's the effects of chanting the mantra. So we can't give enough importance to this, mantra meditation that we do, chanting our japa. It's so important. Narada is saying this is the form of the Lord who is to be worshipped, and especially in Kali Yuga, when the Yuga Dharma is Harinam Sankirtan. It's just all about the sound. So, Krishna descends in this age. Kali Kali Nama Rupa Krishna Avatar, that in this time of Kali Yuga, Krishna descends in the form of the holy name, Nama Rupa. The Nama Rupa is the avatar in this age of Kali. That's the form in which the Lord, of course, Lord Chaitanya came, but he didn't come he is God, but he didn't come as God. He didn't come and say, worship me, I'm God. He gave us the name and he said, this is God, worship this name. So it really it's really the Yagya Purusha is the holy name. And that's why it says that in Kali Yuga, those who are intelligent, yajanti hi sumeda saha, then they're going to engage in Yagya Sankirtana prayer. They're going to engage in the Sankirtan Yagya and worship the Lord that way, by the instructions of the Lord, who showed us how to do it by his personal example. Okay, text 39.
Mataji, may I ask a question here?
Yeah, sure.
The last line of the purport, second last of the line of the purport, second paragraph of this verse number 38 only. the
Yeah.
Pancharatric system is both practical and suitable for this age of quarrel. And the Pancharatra is more important than the Vedanta for this modern age. Here, Pancharatra has been given more importance than Vedanta. But everywhere in Srila Prabhupada books, we have read that Bhagavad system is more important than Pancharatric system. So it seems to be a bit controversial. Can you please clear it?
Yeah, I was also a little confused by that. But see, the thing is that this Pancharatrika was given by, he's talking about the Narada Pancharatra. So he says this has the most authorized codes for transcendental devotional service. So the point is, because he's making this, he's making this statement after saying that we need to receive the mantra from the bona fide spiritual master in disciplic succession and practice it under the direction of the spiritual master. So so the point here is that we can't just whimsically do anything. Everything has to be done according to the rules and regulations of the scriptures and the acharyas. And so the Pancharatrika system gives us those authorized rules and regulations for practical devotional service. So just like we have to worship the deity according to rules and regulations of Pancharatrika, and so also we have to chant the holy name according to the Pancharatrika system. So the mantra that we chant and how many times we chant it, that all has to be according to some system. And Prabhupada says Pancharatrika system. That, yeah, that's what he says here. That's his whole point. Without the help of such codes, one cannot approach the Lord, certainly not by dry philosophical speculation. So we can't just sit around and like concoct some way that I'm going to chant, that I'm going to approach the Lord. We can't concoct a mantra. We can't, oh, Prabhupada said 16, but I'll just chant 12, and I think that'll be fine for me. After all, Kali Yuga is progressing, and so the number should go down. If Prabhupada was here, I'm sure he would diminish it. Like, we can't say that. We can't concoct something. We can't speculate. We have to follow the authorized system. And so just as Pancharatrika gives guidance for deity worship, apparently also it gives guidance for chanting the holy names. And so we should follow some guidelines, authorized guidelines for any of our devotional practices, including chanting.
In the last unit, we had studied that Pancharatric system and Bhagavad system must go parallel. Also,
Yeah.
This also we had read.
Yeah, that's good. So the idea is Vedanta, the Bhagavad system, it emphasizes bhakti and the potent processes of bhakti. And then the Pancharatrika system gives us the practical guidelines, the instructions for how to actually do it practically. So.
Okay, Mataji. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Okay, text 39.
Imam swanigamam brahman avidya mad anushtitam adan me jnanam aishwaryam swasmin bhavam chakeshava. O Brahman, thus by the Supreme Lord Krishna, I was endowed first with the transcendental knowledge of the Lord, as inculcated in the confidential parts of the Vedas, then with the spiritual opulences, and then with his intimate loving service.
Okay, so here you can see that Narada is, what I felt in this verse is a feeling of deep gratitude. Narada is expressing gratitude for all that he's received from the Lord through the mercy of those Bhakti Vedantas and the process of Bhakti that they taught him. So he's kind of like counting his blessings, Sometimes we do like a gratitude. We just list all the things in our life that we're grateful for. So it's almost like that's what Narada is doing here. He's like, yeah, by doing this, I was so blessed by the Lord. I was endowed with all these things. First, the Lord gave me jnanam, transcendental knowledge. He gave me realization of himself. And then he gave me aishvaryam. He gave me all these mystic opulences, the 8 mystic cities, that I didn't even want. I wasn't even asking for those. He just gave them to me, like just like a special gift on the side. And then when he saw that I wasn't attached to those mystic cities, then he bestowed transcendental love for him upon me. He gave me swasmin bhavam. personal, intimate affection and love for himself, Keshava. So it's significant that Narada doesn't feel that he achieved these by his own power. He's not saying that, yeah, through my sadhana, I got this by my own merit, by my own hard work and discipline and determination. I was able to develop transcendental knowledge and mystic powers and Krishna prema. He doesn't say that at all. He says, I was endowed with, these things were bestowed upon me. So in other words, he's making the point that they came from the Lord through the mercy and blessings of the pure devotee. So yeah, and Prabhupada writes in the purport here that the Lord reveals his identity gradually to one who has unflinching faith, both in the spiritual master and in the Lord. That famous verse that we always say, Yasyadeve Parabhaktir, Tata Devi Tatagaro. So after this, the devotee is endowed with mystic opulences, which are 8 in number. And above all, the devotee is accepted in the confidential entourage of the Lord and is entrusted with specific service of the Lord through the agency of the spiritual master. So this is a gradual unfolding here. That first, we learn who Krishna is. Next, we get some mystic powers. And after that, provided that we don't get distracted by those mystic powers. This is not so much for the pure bhakti yogis, but for those who are, that their bhakti is tinged with a little bit of gyan or like yoga mishra bhakti, that they're interested in these siddhis. But we see, like in most of the systems, that these siddhis are offered, and it's almost like a test, that you get some powers. And even in bhakti, we get, there are side effects. There are side benefits of bhakti that can distract us if we take those to be the real goals of bhakti. Like maybe you become famous, you become, you get a lot of donations, you become wealthy, you see like, ISKCON gurus, they have so many resources at their disposal. They can travel all over the world, wherever they go. Some places they have their own rooms, their own house. They have all kinds of, their worship and adoration and just, everything a materialist would want, right? All the things that your average materialist on the street is working for, to get money and property and fame and adoration and worship. That's what they're after: positions, power, influence over people. So if you look at the gurus in ISKCON, they have all that to the nth degree, like it's such a huge way. And it's almost like a test. So those are the opulences that Prabhupada translates spiritual opulences. Those are we don't necessarily get mystic siddhis. They might also get mystic siddhis. Sometimes devotees can do some pretty amazing things that they even surprise themselves at, like how by their desire something happened. So that's a mystic siddhi, or that you can control someone's mind. Some devotees can do that. So, even I know sometimes, you can use Gayatri mantras to make things happen, like cure illnesses and change the weather and make it stop raining and all these things. So sometimes devotees can't even do these things. But it's like a test. Like, is that what you want? Is that your goal? Are you going to stop there and just be happy with those opulences? Or do you really want my intimate loving service? Are you willing to give those up to enter my entourage, my confidential entourage? So if we're not tempted by those side benefits, by those spiritual opulences that are offered, if we just, engage whatever comes in the service of the Lord and remain simple and humble and pure and focused on our identity as just insignificant servants of the Lord, then Krishna will trust us that we don't have any ulterior motives. And then he will allow us to enter into his confidential entourage, and there will be entrusted. See this word entrusted, because he can trust us. Then we will be given a specific service to the Lord within those confidential eternal pastimes. And Prabhupada says, a pure devotee is more interested in serving the Lord than in showing exhibition of mystic powers dormant in him. Narada explained all these from his personal experience, and one can obtain all the facilities which Narada obtained by perfecting the chanting process of the sound representation of the Lord. Yeah, so these are the effects. So he gave the mantra, he explained the purpose of the mantra, and now he's giving the effects that he himself experienced by chanting that mantra, that he was able to enter into the personal, eternal loving service of the Lord. And Prabhupada says there's no bar for chanting this transcendental sound by anyone, as long as it's received through Narada's representative, coming down in the chain of disciplic succession. So that's where the Pancharatra thing comes in, that it has to be, that anyone can chant, but it has to be done properly. It has to be received through Narada's representative, coming down the chain of disciplic succession in the parampara system. And yeah, somebody was wanting me to expand on the point that I made, that the mantra has to be received from a living guru, because that's the way disciplic succession works, is that you hear the mantra from your guru. How are you going to receive the mantra from a guru who's not living, who's not physically present with you? How are you going to hear that mantra? Of course, you could hear it from a recording or something, or someone could give it to you on behalf, like a Ritvik sort of thing. But that's not the way the Vedic system is. And, like we don't chant the mantra of Narada Muni, because that's not what we were given. We were given a particular mantra, and we need to have a living guru, because we need to have somebody needs to assess whether we're qualified, especially for Gayatri Brahman initiation. Someone needs to assess whether we're qualified, even for Harinam initiation. It's not that anyone can just show up, oh, Guru Maharaj, will you initiate me? No, you need to qualify yourself. You need to chant for 16 rounds and follow the 4 regs for at least a year, and cultivate 6 months at least relationship with Srila Prabhupada, and show some detachment from material life, and show some eagerness to serve Krishna, and be a devotee. So we have to be convinced about that. So someone needs to assess the person's progress and their readiness for both first and second initiation. And if you don't have a living guru, like, who's going to correct you, who's going to guide you, who's going to answer your questions, who's going to correct you when you do something wrong? So we need we need the living guru. And as the other thing is that as Kali Yuga progresses, then the situation of life changes, and so things that were the instructions and just the way that philosophy was presented by previous gurus, which may be like 1,000 years earlier, right? Let's say in the year 3023, they're ISKCON gurus. The world is going to be very different in 3023. And a lot of, the examples and analogies and things that Prabhupada gave are going to be difficult for people to understand. It's already like that. So, it needs to be presented by a living guru, because the living guru understands the desha, kala, the time and place and circumstances of the audience which he is delivering the message to, and he can present it in a way that's suitable for their understanding. So, for all those reasons, we need a living guru, and we need to, otherwise there's so much room for concoction, misinterpretation, speculation, misunderstanding. So this system is the safest system, and that's why it's the Vedic system, because it's the best system. It's Krishna's system. So we can't concoct something new. Otherwise, if it's not Krishna's system, it's not going to work. Because we were just learning that in order for anything to work, even for a boat to cross a river, it needs to be sanctioned by Krishna. What to speak of in order to chant a mantra and go back to Godhead? That definitely needs to be sanctioned by Krishna. We can't make up our own way. Okay. All right. So let's go to the last verse. We're getting over time already. Text 40.
Tavamapadya bhapshutra vishrutram vibho samapyate yena vidambu bhutsitam prakhyahi dukher mohorditatmanam sankalesha nirvana mushanti nanyatha. Translation: Please therefore describe the Almighty Lord's activities which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned man and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries.
Yeah, so this now is the conclusion to Narada's instructions to Vyas. And he's saying this is the only way to get out of the material miseries, is to hear about the pastimes of Krishna. And so he's saying, please, therefore, therefore, like the conclusion of all that I've said before, therefore, please describe the Almighty Lord's activities. You know those activities, you've learned them, and this is the only way to get out of the miseries of life. So he mentions two different groups. He says common people. First of all, the common people, they're always suffering the material, different kinds of material pangs. And hearing the pastimes of Krishna will mitigate those miseries. And then another group, he says, that those people who are especially learned, that learned people, they're hankering after real knowledge. They want advanced spiritual knowledge. And so the descriptions of the Lord will satisfy their hankering for knowledge of the absolute truth. And in the purport, Prabhupada, he makes it even more broadly inclusive. And he's drawing on Bhagavad Gita 7:15 and 16, the four kinds of people that surrender to Krishna and the four kinds of people that don't surrender to Krishna. And he says that all of them can benefit, even the ones who don't surrender. They can also benefit because they're all souls, for one. And for two, they're all suffering. That's what this verse is about, how people are suffering. So there's just different flavors of suffering. The pious people, they approach Krishna. Why? Because they're suffering, they're in distress, they need money, or they want to know something that they don't know, they can't figure it out themselves, so they approach Krishna. They surrender to Krishna to try to understand. And then the demoniac people, they're suffering even more due to getting kicked very hard by the three modes of material nature. So they're all souls, they're all suffering, they all just have different degrees of ignorance. But the root of ignorance for all of them is that they've accepted something that is anartha as artha, or something that is useless as valuable. So yeah, it just reminded me, the wording of this verse reminded me of this verse that comes later in the 7th chapter, Anartano Pashanam Sakshat, Bhakti Yogam Adokshaje, Lokasya Janato Vidvams Chakre Satvata Samhitam. It says that the material miseries of the living entity, which are superfluous to him, can be directly mitigated by the linking process of devotional service. But the mass of people do not know this, and therefore the learned Vyasadeva compiled this Vedic literature, which is in relation to the supreme truth. So, yeah, here in text 40 is saying that the common people are suffering from material pangs, and the learned men are hankering. But if you would just describe the Almighty Lord's activities, which you've learned from your vast knowledge of the Vedas, then all these miseries can be mitigated. And indeed, there's no other way to get out of these miseries. So later, when Vyas follows all the instructions of Narada exactly to the T, he enters into that deep meditative trance that Narada told him to do. He sees the Lord. He gets that amoga drik. He gets that perfect vision. And he sees the Lord. He sees Maya. He understands the whole situation of how people in this world are illusioned, how they came to identify with matter, how they came to accept all these things that are anartha, that are just useless. The whole I, me, and mine, the ego, the miseries, the misidentification of the self with matter, all these things are anartha. But people are thinking that they're so important and so valuable and they're the goal of life. So then in order to smash these anarthas, anartha upashamam, upashamam means mitigate, in order to relieve people of these misconceptions, these unwanted things, then he needs to highlight the Lord and the process to link oneself to the Lord. Bhakti Yogam Adokshaja. And that Adokshaja, the Lord, he can't be perceived by material senses. So he has to be perceived by spiritual senses in order to awaken our spiritual senses. We need to hear about the Lord and serve the Lord. So this all boils down to the same thing, that the conclusion that Vyasadeva really needs to write the Srimad Bhagavatam. And that's what he will eventually do, and that's what we're studying. So thank God that Narada came and gave the instruction, and thank God that Vyasadeva followed it. So he'll hear more about all these things. But before that, Vyasadeva is going to have more questions about Narada's life, remember, because he mentioned some things, and certainly Vyasa became curious. So chapter 6 starts with, it opens up with Vyasadeva saying, tell me more about what happened after those Bhaktivedantas left, and how did you come to, meet the Lord face to face. So that you'll get in your class next weekend. All right, I'm sorry for going over time, but I'm willing to stay on and answer questions if there are any, since this is our last class. So whoever doesn't have to leave and has some questions, go ahead. No questions at all?
All clear, Mataji, you have explained very well.
Either everything was
so
very
much.
clear, or else you're all spacing
Mataji,
out.
you taught so well that we don't have any doubt.
Yeah, all clear, Mataji.
Okay. All right then. So thank you so much for your association. It's been a pleasure to dive into the Bhagavatam and churn some of these topics with you. And if you weren't students in the class, then I wouldn't be teaching. And if I wasn't teaching, then I wouldn't be getting all the benefit that I'm getting from studying the Bhagavatam deeply and researching the commentaries and all these Sanskrit word meanings and trying to put it all together. So this has been a very nice experience for me also.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
And best wishes with the rest of your Bhagavatam studies. I'll probably be seeing you again at some point. I'm sure somebody will be dropping me a line saying, can you teach this section? So see you again. And I might see you also in Delhi. I seems like I'm coming to New Delhi. I'll be coming to Vrindavan in November, December, until the beginning of January. I already bought my ticket. So if I'm still alive at the end of the year, you might see me there. Okay. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare